3 years ago, billionaire Damian Cross destroyed the woman he loved on live television, accused her of betrayal, watched her vanish, and never looked back. Tonight, at his engagement party in a Chicago tower overlooking the storm, she walks back into his life like a ghost rising from hell. But Seraphina Vale isn't the soft artist he remembered. She's something darker now, something dangerous. And the envelope she slides across the marble floor contains proof that everyone Damian trusts is planning to kill him. The war she survived alone is about to swallow them both whole. If you're watching from your city right now, drop a comment and tell me where you are so I can see how far this story travels. Hit that like button and let's dive into the darkness together. The rain hit Chicago like bullets that November night, drilling against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Blackthorn Tower's penthouse ballroom. Damian Cross stood near the bar, scotch untouched in his hand, watching 300 of the city's most powerful people pretend they gave a damn about his engagement. The chandeliers threw fractured light across marble floors. A string quartet played something he didn't recognize. His fiancée, Celeste Laurent, worked the room like she owned it, which, in a way, she would soon enough. He felt nothing. That was the problem. He'd spent 3 years building walls so thick nothing got through anymore. Not joy. Not pain. Certainly not love. The Cross Empire had expanded into 17 states since the scandal. His net worth had tripled. Every business magazine called him a visionary, a titan, a man who'd risen from the ashes of public humiliation stronger than ever. What they didn't know was that the ashes were all he had left. Damian, darling, you're brooding again. Celeste materialized at his elbow, diamonds glittering at her throat. Her smile was camera-ready, perfect white teeth against crimson lips. She'd perfected that smile over 6 months of dating, deployed it like a weapon at every charity gala and board meeting. Senator Drayton wants to discuss the River North development. You promised you'd be charming tonight. I'm always charming, Damian said, but the words came out flat, dead. Celeste's eyes flickered, just for a second, with something that might have been annoyance. Then the smile locked back into place. Of course you are. She squeezed his arm, nails pressing through his Tom Ford jacket. 5 minutes with Drayton, that's all I'm asking. She glided away before he could answer, leaving behind the scent of Chanel No. 5 in calculation. Damian watched her go, watched her laugh at something the senator whispered, watched her touch his shoulder with practiced intimacy. She was good. He'd give her that. 3 years ago, he would have called it grace. Now he recognized the mechanics underneath. The careful positioning, the strategic touches, the way she always kept one eye on whoever held the most power in the room, just like Seraphina used to do. No. He killed that thought before it could breathe. Seraphina was gone. Dead, probably, though they'd never found a body. She'd vanished the night he'd held that press conference, the night he'd stood in front of every major news outlet and systematically destroyed her life. He'd had evidence, or what he'd thought was evidence. Financial records showing she'd sold proprietary designs to his competitors. Emails that proved she'd been feeding information to a rival development firm. Her signature on documents that would have bankrupted him. He'd loved her, so when she betrayed him, he'd made sure everyone knew exactly what she'd done. Except lately, at 3 a.m, when the scotch stopped working, he'd started wondering if he'd been wrong. Thunder cracked overhead, so loud the windows shuddered. The lights flickered. Someone gasped. Then the ballroom doors, massive oak panels that took 2 men to move, swung open with a sound like a gunshot. The woman who walked through shouldn't have existed. She wore black velvet that fit like violence, dark hair swept back from a face Damian would have recognized in hell. But this wasn't the Seraphina he remembered. That woman had been soft, gentle, always smiling like the world was something to be loved instead of conquered. This woman moved like a blade, precise, controlled, every step calculated. Her eyes swept the ballroom with the cold assessment of someone cataloging exits and threats. And when her gaze found Damian across 300 people and 30 yards of polished marble, he felt the impact like a fist to the chest. The room went silent. Every conversation died mid-word. Glasses froze halfway to lips. Even the string quartet stuttered to a confused stop. Seraphina walked forward. Water dripped from her coat, leaving a dark trail across the floor. Nobody moved to stop her. There was something in the way she carried herself, something that made men in $1,000 suits step aside without thinking about it. Damian couldn't breathe. His fingers went numb around the Scotch glass. His heart hammered against his ribs like it was trying to escape. She stopped 6 feet away, close enough that he could see the tiny scar above her left eyebrow. New, hadn't been there before. Close enough that he could smell rain and gunpowder and something darker underneath. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Hello, Damian." Her voice was wrong. Too steady. Too cold. The Seraphina he'd known used to stumble over her words when she was nervous, used to laugh at her own jokes before she finished telling them. This woman's voice cut through the silence like wire through skin. "You're dead." The words came out strangled. His throat had forgotten how to work. "You're supposed to be dead?" She tilted her head, and for just a second something ancient and broken flickered behind her eyes. "I was." "You made sure of that, didn't you?" Celeste appeared at Damian's side, her hand wrapping around his arm with enough force to bruise. "Security! Someone call security right now!" Seraphina's gaze shifted to Celeste, and Damian watched his fiancée flinch. Actually flinch, like she'd been slapped. When Seraphina looked back at him, she reached into her coat and pulled out a manila envelope. She held it out between them like a peace offering, or maybe a declaration of war. "You need to see this," Seraphina said quietly. "Before midnight. Before they kill you." "Is that a threat?" Celeste's voice went shrill. "You can't just walk in here and—" "It's not a threat." Seraphina's eyes never left Damian's face. "It's a warning. Open the envelope, Damian, or don't. But when you're lying in a pool of your own blood wondering who did this to you, remember I tried." She turned to leave. Damian's hand shot out before his brain could catch up, fingers wrapping around her wrist. She went absolutely still. He felt her pulse hammering against his thumb, the only sign she was human, that underneath the armor something still beat. "Tell me," he said. His voice came out raw. "Whatever it is, just tell me now." Seraphina looked down at his hand, then back up at his face. "The woman beside you isn't who you think she is. Neither are half the people in this room. You've been surrounded by enemies for 3 years, and you never even noticed." She pulled free from his grip with a sharp twist. "I spent 3 years keeping you alive, Damian. Don't waste it by being stupid." She walked away. The crowd parted for her like the Red Sea, and then she was gone, vanished back into the storm. The doors slammed shut. For 5 long seconds, nobody moved. Then everyone started talking at once, a rising wave of shock and speculation and scandal. Damian stared at the envelope in his hand. His name was written on the front in handwriting he used to see on sticky notes left on the bathroom mirror, on grocery lists tucked into his briefcase, on birthday cards that always made him laugh. "Give me that." Celeste reached for the envelope, but Damian stepped back. "No." "Damian, she's clearly unstable. Whatever's in there is probably—" "I said no." He met her eyes, and something must have shown in his face because Celeste went very quiet. "Go back to the party. I need a minute." "We need to call the police. She just threatened you in front of 300 witnesses." "She warned me. There's a difference." Celeste's mouth compressed into a thin line. 5 minutes. "Then I'm calling security whether you like it or not." She spun on her heel and stalked toward a cluster of concerned-looking city council members, her smile already sliding back into place. Damian walked to the far corner of the ballroom where floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Chicago skyline. Lightning spider-webbed across the clouds. He could see his reflection in the glass, hollow-eyed, grim, older than his 34 years. His hands shook as he opened the envelope. Photographs spilled out, dozens of them. The first showed Celeste sitting across from a man Damian didn't recognize in a dimly lit restaurant. The second showed the same man handing her a thick envelope. The third was a surveillance photo taken through a car window. Celeste in the passenger seat, the man's hand on her thigh. Damian's stomach turned over. He kept flipping through them. More meetings, more exchanges. Celeste entering a warehouse in a part of town no socialite had any business being. Celeste standing beside the man, who wore an expensive suit and rings on every finger, while he pointed at a map spread across a table. The map showed Blackthorn Tower with several points marked in red. The last photograph made his blood go cold. Celeste and the man standing in what looked like a penthouse apartment. Behind them on the wall was a portrait, crude, aggressive, the kind of thing mob families commissioned. And in the center of that portrait was a face Damian recognized from newspaper articles about organized crime. Luca Moretti. His vision tunneled. The envelope fell from his numb fingers, photographs scattering across the marble like evidence at a crime scene. His brain refused to process what he'd just seen. Celeste worked for him, shared his bed, knew every detail of his business operations, his security protocols, his schedule. She'd had 6 months to study his weaknesses, 6 months to map his entire life. And Damian had given her access to everything. Breathe. The voice came from directly behind him. Damian spun, hand instinctively going for the gun he didn't carry anymore, but Seraphina was already backing up with her palms raised. She'd circled back somehow, probably through the service corridors. Easy, I'm on your side. You vanished for 3 years. His voice came out savage. You let me think you were dead, and now you show up talking about enemies and conspiracies like... He stopped, throat closing up. Why should I believe anything you say? Because I'm the only person in this building who doesn't want you dead. Seraphina moved to the window, keeping distance between them, and started gathering the scattered photographs with efficient movements. Luca Moretti runs half of Chicago's underground. Drugs, guns, real estate laundering, human trafficking. If it makes money and destroys lives, he's got a piece of it. 3 years ago, he decided your empire was in his way. I don't deal with criminals. You do now. She straightened, photos organized in her hands. That River North development you're so proud of? Built on land Moretti used for weapons storage. Your expansion into Milwaukee? You outbid him on 3 properties he wanted for money laundering. Every time you grow, you step on his operation. She held up the surveillance photo of Celeste in the warehouse. So he put someone inside. Someone smart enough to get close, patient enough to wait, ruthless enough to pull the trigger when the time came. Damian's knees went weak. He sat down hard on the window ledge. When? Tonight? Midnight? Your engagement was just the excuse to gather everyone important in one place. Seraphina's voice stayed flat, clinical. Celeste has 3 men planted among the catering staff. Former military, real professionals. The plan is to make it look like a gas leak. Blow the penthouse with everyone inside. Moretti gets your empire, your assets, your connections. And Celeste walks away clean with a widow's inheritance. How long have you known? Something flickered across her face, too fast to read. Long enough. That's not an answer. I've known since the beginning, Damian. Since before you ever met her. Seraphina turned away from him, looking out at the storm. Moretti's been hunting you for 3 years. I've been hunting him for just as long. The words hung there, heavy as stones. Damian's mind raced, trying to connect pieces that refused to fit. 3 years ago, the evidence against you, the emails, the financial records, were manufactured. Moretti's people are good at what they do. She paused. I tried to tell you. The night before that press conference, I begged you to listen. You wouldn't. He remembered. God, he remembered. Seraphina had shown up at his office at 2 a.m, rain-soaked and desperate, trying to explain something about being followed, about people watching her, about evidence being planted. He'd been so certain of his righteousness, so convinced by the documents his lawyers had compiled, that he'd called security, had her physically removed from the building. 2 days later, she was gone. I destroyed you, he said quietly. The words tasted like ash. I stood in front of cameras and called you a thief and a liar. I made sure nobody would ever trust you again. Yes. And you still came back to warn me. Seraphina turned back to face him, and for the first time since she'd walked through those doors, her mask cracked. He could see the exhaustion underneath, the weight of whatever she'd been carrying alone. I came back because you're still my husband, Damian. We never got divorced. The paperwork was just another thing Moretti's people buried. Her laugh came out broken. Surprise! We're still married, in sickness and in health and through 3 years of hell. Thunder rolled overhead. In the ballroom behind them, the party continued, oblivious, cheerful, completely unaware that half the room was wired to explode in 90 minutes. What do I do? Damian asked. His voice sounded young, lost. All his certainty had evaporated, leaving nothing but fear and confusion. How do I... You trust me. Seraphina stepped closer, and he could see the tiny scars that mapped her face like a history of violence. Just this once, Damian. You trust that I know what I'm doing, Because if we stay here past midnight, we both die. And if we run without dealing with Moretti first, he'll hunt us down inside a week. Then what? The lights went out. Complete darkness slammed into the ballroom. Someone screamed, glass shattered. Then emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red as alarms started shrieking. Through the windows, Damian could see the entire block had gone dark. Every building, every streetlight, swallowed by the storm. No! Seraphina's voice went sharp with panic, the first real emotion he'd heard from her. They moved up the timeline. We've got minutes, maybe less. She grabbed his arm and pulled. Damian stumbled after her, photographs forgotten on the floor, as they plunged into the crowd. People were shouting now, confused and frightened, pressing toward the exits. Through the chaos, Damian caught a glimpse of Celeste near the main doors, phone pressed to her ear, her face calm. Too calm. Like someone watching a carefully laid plan unfold exactly on schedule. She saw him looking. Their eyes met across the panicking crowd, and she smiled. That smile told him everything. Seraphina hadn't been lying. Every word was true. The woman he'd been planning to marry, the woman he'd shared his bed and his secrets with, had been watching him like a specimen in a jar, just waiting for the moment to strike. Service entrance, Seraphina hissed, dragging him sideways. They hit a door marked staff only, and she kicked it open, revealing a concrete stairwell. Move, now! They ran. Footsteps echoed above and below them. Other people fleeing, or maybe Moretti's men closing in. Impossible to tell. Damian's chest burned. His thoughts fragmented into useless pieces. 3 years of rebuilding his life, of convincing himself he'd survived the worst thing that could happen, and it had all been a lie. A setup. A long con leading to this exact moment. They burst out of the stairwell on the parking level. Seraphina pulled him toward a black SUV with tinted windows, keys already in her hand. As they reached it, Damian heard something that froze his blood. The distinct sound of a round being chambered. Get down! Seraphina shoved him behind the SUV as gunfire erupted. Bullets sparked off concrete, shattered windshields, whined off steel. She had her own gun out now. When had she drawn it, returning fire with mechanical precision? One shooter dropped, then another. A third scrambled behind a pillar. Damian's ears rang. His hand shook so badly he could barely get the passenger door open. Seraphina slid behind the wheel, engine already roaring to life. She threw the SUV into reverse and floored it, tires screaming as more gunfire chased them toward the exit ramp. They exploded onto the street doing 60. Rain hammered the windshield. Seraphina took corners like she'd memorized the route, like she'd practiced this escape 100 times. In the rearview mirror, Damian could see Blackthorn Tower rising into the storm, red emergency lights pulsing in every window. Then the penthouse level erupted into flame. The explosion was massive, a rolling ball of fire that blew out every window on the top 3 floors. The sound hit seconds later, a concussive boom that Damian felt in his chest. Debris rained down onto the street. Car alarms shrieked. People poured out of surrounding buildings, faces turned upward in horror. 300 people. The entire city's power structure, gone in an instant. Except Damian wasn't there. Because Seraphina had pulled him out 5 minutes before midnight. She drove in silence, hands steady on the wheel, face carved from stone. Damian watched the city blur past. Familiar streets now foreign, every shadow a potential threat. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again, and again. Text messages flooding in from people who'd just watched his engagement party turn into an inferno on live news feeds. He didn't answer any of them. Where are we going? His voice came out hoarse. Somewhere safe, Seraphina said. Nowhere's actually safe, but somewhere safer than here. How many people knew? About tonight? Just Celeste and Moretti's inner circle. The shooters on our floor were expendable, probably didn't even know the full plan. She took another sharp turn. Everyone at that party was supposed to die, Damian. Politicians, judges, business leaders, mob financiers who'd been using your company to launder money without your knowledge. Moretti was wiping the board clean, taking out everyone who could challenge him and framing you as a terrorist in one move. The magnitude of it crashed over him. His reputation was already destroyed. Again. Except this time he actually was innocent. They'll think I did it. The explosion. All those people. I know. The FBI, the police, every agency in the city will be hunting me by dawn. I know. So what the hell is your plan? Hide until they find us? Run until we're dead? Seraphina pulled into an underground parking garage, killed the engine, and finally looked at him. In the dim light, he could see how much these 3 years had cost her. The hardness in her eyes wasn't natural. It was armor built from pain and survival. My plan, she said quietly, is to do what I've been doing since the night you destroyed my life. I'm going to dismantle Luca Moretti's empire piece by piece until there's nothing left. I'm going to expose every politician he bought, every judge he owns, every cop on his payroll, and then I'm going to put a bullet between his eyes. She opened her door, cold air rushing in. You can come with me, or I can drop you at a safe house, and you can wait this out. But either way, Moretti dies. That's the only way this ends. She got out, leaving Damian sitting alone in the passenger seat, while sirens wailed in the distance and the city burned above them. He thought about his old life, the empire he'd built, the reputation he'd crafted, the carefully controlled existence he'd constructed after Seraphina vanished. All of it was ash now, gone. The only thing left was the woman who'd warned him, who'd saved him, who'd spent 3 years in hell keeping him alive from the shadows. The woman he'd destroyed because he'd been too arrogant to see the truth. Damian climbed out of the SUV. His legs felt unsteady, but he forced them to work. Seraphina was pulling a duffel bag from the trunk, checking weapons with the efficiency of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. I'm coming with you, he said. She paused, looked up at him. You're not built for this. Then I'll learn. People are going to die, Damian, probably including us. I know. She studied his face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever she found must have satisfied her because she nodded once, sharp and final. Then we start tonight. Moretti owns a warehouse in Pilsen, uses it to store cocaine shipments before distribution. We hit it, take everything we can carry, burn the rest. Send a message that the war just got personal. Tonight, the city's going to be crawling with cops, which means Moretti's people will be distracted. She tossed him a tactical vest from the bag. Put this on. And Damian? She waited until he looked up. When we walk through that door, there's no going back. Your old life is over. The man you used to be, he died in that explosion. You understand? He caught the vest, felt the weight of it in his hands. Bulletproof material, reinforced plating, smelling like cordite, and decisions that couldn't be unmade. Through the concrete above them, he could still hear sirens, could still see, when he closed his eyes, the fireball-consuming Blackthorn Tower, could still see Celeste's smile as 300 people marched toward their deaths. I understand, he said, and pulled the vest over his head. Seraphina handed him a gun. Then let's go to war. The warehouse in Pilsen squatted between abandoned factories like a rotting tooth. Seraphina killed the headlights 2 blocks out and let the SUV coast to a stop behind a collapsed loading dock. Rain hammered the roof. Through the windshield, Damian could see sodium lights throwing sickly orange across cracked pavement and rusted chain link. 2 men stood guard at the main entrance, assault rifles slung casual across their chests, like this was just another Tuesday night. How many inside? Damian asked. His voice came out steadier than he felt. 10, maybe 12. Seraphina was checking her gun, movements precise and mechanical. Moretti keeps a skeleton crew on distribution nights. Most of his muscle is downtown dealing with the aftermath of the explosion. She looked at him. You ever killed anyone? No? You might have to tonight. I know. She studied his face like she was trying to read a language she'd forgotten. If you freeze up in there, we both die. If you hesitate, we both die. If you try to be the good man you think you still are, we die. You understand what I'm telling you? Damian's hands tightened on the gun she'd given him. A Glock 19, she'd called it. 9mm, 15 rounds. Simple mechanics, point and squeeze. He'd fired guns at ranges before. Corporate team-building exercises where everyone laughed and compared groupings over craft beer afterward. This was different. This was agreeing to put holes in human beings and watch them bleed out on concrete. I understand, he said. No, you don't. Seraphina pulled a suppressor from the duffel and threaded it onto her barrel. But you will. They moved through the rain like shadows. Seraphina led, each step calculated, using abandoned machinery and shipping containers for cover. Damian followed, heart hammering so hard he thought the guards would hear it. Water soaked through his shoes. The tactical vest chafed against his ribs. Every instinct screamed at him to turn back, to call the police, to handle this like a civilized person. But civilized people died in explosions surrounded by champagne and lies. Seraphina held up a fist. They froze behind a rusted dumpster 20 yards from the entrance. She made hand signals he didn't understand, then seemed to remember he had no training. She leaned close, lips brushing his ear. "I take the one on the left. You take the right. Aim for center mass. Don't think. Just shoot." Wait. But she was already moving, fluid and silent, closing the distance before the guards registered motion. Her gun coughed twice. Soft sounds swallowed by rain. The left guard dropped. The right one started to turn, started to bring his rifle up, and Damian's body took over. Muscle memory from 100 Sunday afternoons at the range. He raised the Glock, found the sight picture, and squeezed. The gun kicked. The guard's chest bloomed red. He stumbled backward, hit the wall, slid down, leaving a dark smear. His eyes were open, still blinking, still aware. Damian stood frozen, watching life drain out of a man whose name he'd never know, whose face he'd see every time he closed his eyes for the rest of his life. "Move." Seraphina's hand on his shoulder, pulling him forward. They dragged the bodies into shadows, retrieved weapons, kept going. The warehouse door was unlocked. Of course it was. When you owned the neighborhood, when cops looked the other way and politicians cashed your checks, you didn't worry about security. Inside smelled like mildew and chemicals. Forklifts sat idle between towers of wooden crates. Bare bulbs hung from rafters, casting harsh light and deep shadow. Voices echoed from somewhere deeper in, men laughing, cards being shuffled, a radio playing narco-corridos turned low. Seraphina pointed to a catwalk running along the left wall. They climbed, boots silent on metal grating. From above, Damian could see the entire operation. 8 men sat around a folding table playing poker, stacks of cash and cocaine bricks piled between them like party favors. 2 more stood near a loading bay, smoking cigarettes and checking phones. In the far corner, a mountain of plastic-wrapped packages waited for distribution, millions of dollars worth of poison ready to flood Chicago's streets. His phone buzzed. Damian jerked, nearly dropping it. Seraphina's glare could have cut steel. He pulled it out carefully. Text message from a number he didn't recognize. "Where are you? Cops are looking for you. Everyone thinks you're dead or on the run. Call me." Marcus. Marcus Chen. His CFFO. One of the few people at that party he'd actually considered a friend, except Marcus had been standing near the blast radius when the explosion hit. Should have been vapor, should have been nothing but DNA samples and dental records. "He's alive," Damian whispered. Seraphina glanced at the phone. Her jaw tightened. "Put it away." "But if Marcus survived, maybe others—" I said, "Put it away." Her voice carried an edge that made him flinch. "We're not here to count survivors. We're here to hurt Moretti." She moved along the catwalk toward a better vantage point. Damian followed, mind racing. If Marcus was alive, who else made it out? How many people had Seraphina actually saved by pulling him away early? Or had the explosion been smaller than planned? A malfunction in Moretti's perfect plan. Below them, one of the poker players slammed his cards down. "Pinche trampa! You're cheating, ese." "Fuck you, I'm cheating? You can't bluff worth shit, that's your problem." They were young, early 20s maybe, tattoos crawling up necks, teardrop ink under eyes marking kills or prison time or both. They laughed like kids who'd never considered mortality might apply to them too. Seraphina raised her gun, sighted down on the group. Her finger rested on the trigger, steady as stone. Damian grabbed her wrist. "Wait. For what? They're just—" He stopped. "Just what? Just criminals? Just men who'd chosen this life? Just human beings who laughed and played cards and probably had mothers waiting somewhere for them to come home? We can call the cops. Anonymous tip. Let them handle it." Seraphina's eyes went flat. "And when those cops report back to Moretti, when he knows we were here but didn't finish the job, when he sends twice as many men to the next location and we walk into an ambush?" She twisted her wrist free. "This is war, Damian, not a board meeting. You wanted to come, so be here. All the way here, or get out. She raised the gun again. Damian watched her finger tighten on the trigger, watched her face stay blank and professional while she prepared to end 8 lives like it meant nothing. And maybe that was the worst part. It probably did mean nothing to her anymore. 3 years of this. 3 years of killing and running and surviving. How many bodies had she stacked up, keeping him alive from the shadows? I can't, he said quietly. Can't what? Can't watch you do this. Her laugh came out bitter. Then look away. Close your eyes. Pretend you're still the good man who destroyed my life because he was too righteous to see the truth. She lined up her shot. But don't tell me I'm wrong. You don't get that right anymore. The first shot echoed like thunder in the enclosed space. One of the poker players jerked backward, chair toppling. The other scrambled for weapons, but Seraphina was already firing, methodical and precise. Return fire sparked off the catwalk. Damian hit the deck, hands over his head like a child hiding from monsters. Bullets whined overhead. Someone screamed. Glass shattered. The radio cut out mid-song. When the shooting stopped, the silence felt heavier than the noise. Damian lifted his head. 8 bodies lay scattered around the table, blood pooling between them. The 2 at the loading bay had run. He could hear an engine roaring away into the night. Seraphina stood at the catwalk railing, gun still raised, smoke curling from the suppressor. Her hands didn't shake. Her breathing stayed even. She ejected the spent magazine and slapped in a fresh one without looking down. Clear, she said, like she was announcing the weather. They climbed down. Damian's legs felt disconnected from his body, operating on autopilot while his brain tried to process what he'd just witnessed. Up close, the bodies looked worse. Faces frozen in final moments of shock and pain, eyes still open, blood spreading in dark rivers across concrete. One of them couldn't have been older than 19. Baby fat still softening his jawline beneath the tattoos. Seraphina moved through the carnage without emotion, checking pulses, confiscating phones and weapons. Grab those duffel bags. Start loading cocaine. We take what we can carry, burn the rest. These were people. Damian's voice sounded far away. They had families. They had a choice. Seraphina straightened, meeting his eyes across a lake of blood. Every single one of them chose this. Chose to work for Moretti. Chose to poison kids and murder rivals and enforce his empire. She walked toward him, boots leaving red footprints. You think any of them would have hesitated before killing you? Before raping someone's daughter as a message? Before burying a snitch in an oil drum? That doesn't make it right. Right? The word exploded out of her. You want to talk about right? Where was right when you stood in front of cameras and called me a thief? When you made sure I could never work again, never be trusted again, never exist in polite society again? She was close now, close enough that he could see the grief and rage barely contained beneath her armor. I lost everything because of you, Damian. My reputation, my career, my entire life. And you know what I did? I survived. I learned to shoot. I learned to kill. I learned to become exactly what the world decided I was. I was wrong. The words felt inadequate, microscopic against the weight of what he'd done. Everything I said, everything I believed, it was wrong. I know that now. Now, you know it now. She laughed, sharp and broken. 3 years too late, after I've already become this. She gestured at herself, at the gun in her hand, at the bodies cooling on the floor. You want forgiveness? You want absolution? I can't give you that. I'm too busy keeping us alive. She turned away, started loading cocaine into duffel bags with mechanical efficiency. Damian stood frozen, useless, while the woman he'd loved transformed herself into exactly what survival demanded. The woman who used to cry at sad movies, who rescued stray cats, who believed people were fundamentally good underneath their flaws. That woman was gone. He'd killed her as surely as if he'd pulled a trigger. I'll help, he said finally. Don't bother, you just slow me down. Seraphina, don't. She didn't look up. Don't use my name like we're still who we were. Don't pretend there's anything left between us except necessity and shared enemies. He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, that something still existed in the ruins of what they'd been. But she was right. The man who'd loved Seraphina Vale had been an arrogant fool who'd destroyed the best thing in his life because his ego couldn't handle being wrong. And the woman who'd loved him back had died in the ashes of that destruction. These were different people, strangers wearing familiar faces. Damian grabbed a duffel bag and started loading. They worked in silence broken only by rustling plastic and distant sirens. His phone kept buzzing, messages piling up, Marcus trying to reach him, his lawyers, business partners, news outlets wanting statements, the mayor's office, the FBI. He ignored them all. When the bags were full, Seraphina pulled out a road flare. "Get outside, this whole place is going up." They hauled the duffels to the SUV, then Seraphina went back inside. Through the warehouse windows, Damian watched her move through the space systematically, setting fires. She'd found accelerant somewhere, gasoline or kerosene, and was splashing it over the remaining cocaine, the bodies, the evidence. When she lit the flare, orange light bloomed like a malignant flower. She walked out calm. Behind her, flames climbed toward the rafters. By the time she reached the SUV, the warehouse was an inferno. "Drive," she said. Damian drove. In the rearview mirror, the fire painted the sky. Somewhere distant, fire trucks wailed. Too late. They'd arrived to find nothing but ash and questions. No evidence, no witnesses. Just another mysterious blaze in a neighborhood where nobody saw anything, nobody knew anything, and nobody talked. "Where to?" he asked. "Safe house, north side. We need to regroup." They crossed the Chicago River as dawn started bleeding into the eastern sky. The city looked different now, hostile, full of hidden threats. Every cop car made Damian's pulse spike. Every pedestrian might be one of Moretti's people. Paranoia crawled under his skin like insects. The safe house turned out to be a third-floor walk-up in Rogers Park, the kind of anonymous apartment building where nobody remembered their neighbors' faces. Seraphina led him upstairs that smelled like curry and cigarettes, unlocked 3 separate deadbolts, and pushed into a space that looked like a military barracks fucked a hacker's lair. Weapons on the walls, laptops on folding tables, surveillance equipment stacked in corners. Maps of Chicago covered with pins and red string connecting locations. Photographs taped to every surface. Moretti's known associates, corrupt officials, shell companies, safe houses. 3 years of obsessive investigation turned into wallpaper. "Home sweet home," Seraphina said without humor. She locked the door behind them, checked the windows, pulled the blinds. Then she stripped off her coat and tactical vest, revealing a black tank top and more scars. They mapped her arms like a violent constellation, bullet wounds, knife cuts, burns. Each one a story she'd never told him. Each one a piece of the hell she'd survived alone. Damian set the duffel bags down. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline finally crashing. "How long have you been planning this?" 3 years, give or take. "And you've been living here? Like this?" "This and 4 other places just like it." She moved to a mini fridge, pulled out 2 bottles of water, tossed him one. "I rotate safe houses every few weeks. Never sleep in the same place twice in a row. Never establish patterns." He caught the bottle but couldn't drink. His throat felt packed with glass. "Why didn't you just leave, disappear? Start over somewhere Moretti would never find you?" "I tried." She twisted the cap off her own bottle, drank deep. Made it as far as Mexico City. Had new papers, new identity. A job lined up at a museum restoring colonial art. Should have worked. She set the bottle down. "Then I saw the news. You were engaged to Celeste. And I knew. Knew she was one of his. Knew he was finally making his move. Knew if I didn't come back, you'd die confused and alone thinking she loved you. So you came back." "So I came back." She pulled out her phone, started typing. "Stupid, right? After everything you did to me? After you made the entire world think I was a criminal, I should have let you burn." "Why didn't you?" She looked up. Her eyes held something ancient and tired. "Because I made a promise, like sickness and health. Better or worse. Those words meant something to me, even after they stopped meaning anything to you." The words hit like a fist. Damian sat down hard on a folding chair, his vision blurred. Turned out you could still cry even after watching 8 men die, even after crossing every moral line you'd spent your life drawing. The tears came silent and useless, changing nothing. "I'm sorry." The words were pathetic, microscopic. "I know that doesn't—" "Stop." Seraphina's voice went sharp. "I don't want your apologies. I don't want your guilt. I want your help finishing this." She gestured at the wall of evidence. "Moretti's empire has 3 pillars: political protection, financial infrastructure, and muscle. We just bloodied his muscle. Now we go after his money. She pulled up files on her laptop, turned the screen toward him. Bank statements, wire transfers, shell company filings, the kind of financial forensics that would have made his corporate lawyers weep with joy. Moretti launders through 17 different businesses, she continued. Restaurants, construction firms, real estate development companies. Most of them are fronts, but there's one that's real, a private equity fund called Castellan Capital. They manage investments for half the mob families in the Midwest. Her finger traced a connection on the screen. If we expose Castellan, we expose everyone. Bring down the whole ecosystem. Damian leaned forward, studying the data. Despite everything, the exhaustion, the horror, the moral vertigo, his brain started working. This was familiar territory. Financial crime, paper trails, forensic accounting. These wire transfers, they're structured to avoid reporting requirements. Classic smurfing pattern. Exactly. And this discrepancy here, they're reporting capital gains to the IRS, but the underlying investments don't exist. It's all fabricated returns. Also exactly. Something flickered in her eyes. Approval, maybe? Or recognition of the man she'd married. The one who could read financial statements like poetry. I've got terabytes of evidence, enough to put Castellan's entire board behind bars for decades. But I can't just dump it online. Moretti has people in law enforcement. They'd bury it before anyone important saw it. So we need a clean channel, someone outside his reach, someone with credibility, someone the media would believe. They looked at each other, understanding passed between them unspoken. Marcus, Damian said, your CFO. If he survived the explosion, everyone already thinks you're dead. He'd be the natural person to handle your company's affairs, your personal files. Seraphina's smile was knife-thin. And if he happened to discover evidence of massive financial fraud while settling your estate, he'd have every reason to go public. You want to use Marcus as a weapon. I want to use every weapon we have. She closed the laptop. Question is whether you trust him, whether he's clean or just another one of Moretti's plants. Damian thought about Marcus. 10 years of working together, late nights restructuring deals, early mornings reviewing contracts over bad coffee. Marcus had been at his wedding, had helped him through the divorce proceedings when Seraphina vanished, had stood beside him through every crisis and triumph since. But then again, he'd trusted Celeste too. I don't know, he admitted. 3 years ago, I would have bet my life on him. Now I don't know what's real anymore. Then we test him. Seraphina pulled out a burner phone. You call from this. See how he reacts, what he asks. Whether he's relieved you're alive or surprised the plan failed. And if he's working for Moretti, then we have a bigger problem. She handed him the phone. But we need to know. Can't move forward without knowing who's in our corner. Damian took the phone. His thumb hovered over the keypad. Marcus's number was burned into his memory from a decade of emergency calls and late-night strategizing. He dialed before he could overthink it. 3 rings. 4. Then, hello? Marcus's voice hit like a freight train. Alive, undeniably alive and confused about the unknown number. It's me, Damian said. Silence. Then, Jesus Christ, Damian? Everyone thinks you're... They said you died in the explosion. They said... His voice cracked. Where the hell are you? Somewhere safe. Marcus, I need you to listen carefully. Don't tell anyone you've heard from me. Not the cops, not the FBI. Nobody. What? No, you need to come in. Turn yourself in. They're saying you planted the bomb. They're saying you murdered 300 people, including your own fiancé. Celeste was working for Luca Moretti. She was trying to kill me. That's insane. Damian, you're not thinking straight. The trauma. The shock. I'm thinking perfectly straight. Damian's grip tightened on the phone. Seraphina watched him, eyes calculating. Celeste was Moretti's plant. The explosion was meant to kill me and everyone who might interfere with his takeover. I got out because someone warned me. Who? Seraphina. Another silence. Longer this time. When Marcus spoke again, his voice had changed, gone flat, careful. Seraphina's dead. She's been dead for 3 years. No, she's been hunting Moretti for 3 years, and now we need your help. We? Damian, what have you gotten yourself into? Something I should have been part of all along. He looked at Seraphina, saw her nod. Permission to continue. Marcus, I need you to do something for me. Don't ask questions. Don't hesitate. In my office, bottom drawer of the filing cabinet behind my desk, there's a folder marked Estate Planning. Inside is a USB drive. I need you to take it. Don't plug it into any company computer. Take it home, use a laptop that's never been on our network, and look at what's on it. What's on it? Evidence. Financial records connecting Moretti to half the city's power structure. Enough to bring down his entire operation. The lie came easy. There was no USB drive, no estate planning folder. But if Marcus was clean, he'd look for it and find nothing, giving them time to plant real evidence. If he was dirty, he'd report back to Moretti immediately. Can you do that? Marcus hesitated. Yeah, I can do that. But Damian, you need to tell me where you are. Let me help you properly. Come in from the cold before this gets worse. It's already worse. This is me fixing it. He paused. Do you trust me? Of course I trust you. You're my best friend. Then do this. Get the drive. Look at what's on it. And Marcus? If anyone asks, you never heard from me. We never had this conversation. You're scaring me. Good. Be scared. That means you're paying attention. Damian ended the call before Marcus could respond. He set the phone down. His hands were steady now. Something had shifted during the conversation, some fundamental recalibration of who he was and what he was willing to become. Well? Seraphina asked. He'll either retrieve the drive or report the conversation to Moretti. Either way, we'll know by tomorrow. And if he reports it, then I've lost another person I cared about. Damian stood, moved to the wall of evidence, studied the red string connecting crimes to criminals, to politicians, to corporations. How many people did you have to kill to build all this? You want the real number or the one that lets you sleep at night? The real one. She was quiet for a moment. 37. Not counting tonight, not counting the ones who probably died from information I fed to Moretti's rivals. 37 lives. 37 people who woke up one morning not knowing it was their last. 37 families somewhere mourning the dead. And Seraphina had done it alone, carrying that weight solo while the world thought she was a criminal or a corpse. I don't know how you're still standing, he said quietly. Practice. She moved beside him, shoulder almost touching his. And anger. Lot of anger. At me? At you. At Moretti. At every person who saw the evidence and believed I was guilty without question. At myself for being stupid enough to love you in the first place. She turned to face him. But mostly at you, yeah. You made this necessary, Damian. You destroyed my life so thoroughly that killing became the only language I had left. I know. No, you don't. Her voice went soft, which somehow made it worse. You know intellectually. You understand the facts. But you don't know what it feels like to watch yourself disappear. To see everything you built and loved and believed in get erased by someone you trusted. To realize you have to become a monster just to survive long enough to prove you weren't one. She stepped closer. You want to help me finish this? You want redemption? Then you need to feel what I felt. You need to lose everything too. I already have. My company, my reputation, my life. Your reputation. She laughed, bitter and sharp. You think reputation matters? You can rebuild reputation. You can rebrand. You can hire PR firms and lawyers and make people forget. But you can't rebuild yourself after you've crossed certain lines. You can't unkill someone. You can't unbecome the person who chose survival over morality. Then teach me. The words came out before he could stop them. Teach me how to be what this needs, how to do what's necessary without losing myself completely. You're already lost, Damian. You just don't know it yet. She walked to the window, peeled back the blind slightly, scanned the street below. Dawn had fully arrived now, gray and cold. Chicago waking up to news of disaster, the death toll climbing, investigators searching for a billionaire terrorist who'd murdered the city's elite. Damian's phone buzzed again. Different number this time. He checked it despite Seraphina's warning look. Text message from an unknown sender. I know what you did. I know you're alive. Meet me at Grant Park, Columbus Drive entrance, noon today. Come alone or everyone learns the truth. See. His blood went cold. What is it? Seraphina read his face, crossed the room in 3 steps. He showed her the message, watched her expression harden. Celeste. The name came out like a curse. She survived. How? Because she was never supposed to be in the blast zone. She'd have an exit strategy, a way to slip out before midnight. Seraphina grabbed the phone, read the message again. This is a trap. Obviously. So we ignore it. She's trying to draw you out, finish what the explosion started. Or she has information we need. Damian took the phone back. She worked inside Moretti's operation for months. She knows things. Safe houses, contacts, plans. If we can get to her, she'll kill you the second you're in range. Then you come with me. Cover me. With half the FBI looking for you, in the middle of a public park in daylight? Seraphina shook her head. It's suicide. Everything we're doing is suicide. He met her eyes. But if Celeste is alive, she's leverage against Moretti. Either she leads us to him, or we use her to force him out. Either way, we can't just ignore this. Yes, we can. We stick to the plan, expose his finances, destroy his protection, wait for him to make a mistake. How long will that take? Weeks? Months? Damian gestured at the walls, the evidence, the obsessive documentation of 3 years' worth of hunting. You've been doing this alone for years and he's still operating, still killing, still winning. Maybe it's time to force his hand by using you as bait, if that's what it takes. Seraphina stared at him like she was seeing someone new, or maybe remembering someone old, the version of Damian who'd built an empire through calculated risks and aggressive plays. You really want to do this? I want to end it, today, tomorrow, as soon as possible. He pulled out Marcus's message, showed her the timestamp. We've got 6 hours until noon. That's 6 hours to plan, to position assets, to turn Celeste's trap back on her. And when Moretti springs the real trap, when this isn't about Celeste at all, but about luring us both into the open, then we spring one of our own. Silence stretched between them. Outside, the city moved on, cars honking, people walking to jobs, life continuing like 300 people hadn't died last night in a ball of flame. Like the world hadn't fundamentally shifted. Fine, Seraphina said finally, but we do this my way. Full tactical prep, weapons, backup plans, exit strategies. She moved to a locked cabinet, started pulling out equipment. And Damian, when this goes wrong, because it will go wrong, you follow my lead. No heroics, no improvisation. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Agreed. I mean it. You freeze, you question, you hesitate for even a second, we're both dead. I understand. She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded once, sharp and final. Then let's go kill your fiancé. They spent the next 4 hours preparing. Seraphina walked him through tactical basics, how to move, how to scan, how to identify threats. She gave him a better vest, a backup weapon, an earpiece for communication. She showed him photographs of Moretti's known associates, drilled him on faces until he could identify them from 100 yards away. Grant Park is too exposed, she said, studying maps on her laptop. Multiple sight lines, impossible to secure. She'll have backup positioned here, here, and here. Her finger traced locations. Snipers probably, maybe one on the Art Institute roof, another on the parking garage at Monroe. So how do we counter that? We don't go to Grant Park. She pulled up a different map. We intercept her en route, force the meeting onto our terms, our location. She'll be expecting that. Of course she will, but she'll also be expecting us to walk into her trap or not show up at all. Intercepting is the middle option, risky enough to seem desperate, smart enough to seem calculated. Seraphina zoomed in on a section of Lower Walker Drive. Here, underground, limited access, easy to control. We set up early, wait for her to pass through, take her. Alive? Preferably, dead if necessary. Damian studied the location. Concrete and shadow, the kind of place where screams got swallowed by traffic noise. What if she doesn't come alone? Then we improvise. Seraphina started packing gear. But my guess? She'll come with minimal security. Too many bodies would attract attention, and she thinks you're desperate enough to follow instructions. At 11:15, they left the safe house. The SUV was too recognizable now, probably on every watch list in the city. Instead, they took a battered Honda Civic Seraphina had stashed 2 blocks away. She drove, weaving through traffic with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent years staying invisible. Lower Wacker Drive swallowed them into industrial darkness. Concrete pillars rose like a forest of stone. Flickering lights threw sickly yellow across puddles and trash. Homeless encampments huddled in corners, blue tarps and shopping carts forming temporary kingdoms. Seraphina parked under a burned-out light, killed the engine. She'll come from the east, heading toward Grant Park. We set up here. She pointed to a pillar offering good cover and clear sight lines. I'll take point. You stay back. Watch for flankers. They moved into position. Minutes crawled past like hours. Damian's heart hammered against his ribs. Every car that passed might be Celeste. Every shadow might hide a gun. His hands were slick with sweat inside tactical gloves. Contact, Seraphina whispered through the earpiece. Black Mercedes, 2 vehicles back. That's her. Damian spotted it, sleek and expensive, out of place among the delivery trucks and taxis. The Mercedes slowed as it approached their position. Seraphina stepped out from behind the pillar, gun raised. Stop the car, she shouted. The Mercedes didn't stop. It accelerated, engine roaring. Seraphina fired. Controlled bursts aimed at the tires. Rubber exploded. The car swerved, hit a pillar, rebounded into a wall. Steam hissed from the crumpled hood. Damian ran forward despite Seraphina's curse over the comm. He reached the passenger side, yanked the door open, gun trained on the interior. Empty. No driver. No Celeste. Just a cell phone duct taped to the steering wheel, screen glowing with a video call. Celeste's face filled the display. She smiled, beautiful and terrible. Hello, darling. Miss me? Where are you? Damian demanded. Somewhere safe. Somewhere you'll never find me without help. Her smile widened. But here's the thing, Damian. I don't actually want to kill you. Not anymore. You're worth more alive. Bullshit, Seraphina snarled, appearing at his shoulder. You tried to blow him up last night. That was business, Luca's orders. But now? Celeste leaned closer to her camera. Now Luca wants you both. Wants to know how the wife he thought was dead spent 3 years dismantling his operation. Wants to understand who's been killing his people, burning his product, stealing his money. Her eyes glittered. Turn yourselves in. Surrender to me, and I'll make sure your deaths are quick instead of lasting weeks in one of Luca's basements. Hard pass, Seraphina said. Then I'll make you a better offer. Meet me, face to face. No weapons. No tricks. Just you, me, and honest conversation. She paused. Or I release this. The screen changed. Security footage from Blackthorn Tower, Damian and Seraphina in the parking garage, guns drawn, shooting at Moretti's men, timestamp visible, faces clear. The kind of evidence that would destroy any claim of innocence. I've got 30 copies, Celeste continued, distributed to journalists, lawyers, federal agents, all set to release automatically if I don't check in every 6 hours. So you can kill me. But the truth goes public anyway. What do you want? Damian asked. I want to make a deal. I want to offer you something Luca doesn't know I have, a way to hurt him worse than anything you've done so far. Her smile turned sharp. I want to betray the man who tried to make me kill the love of my life. Seraphina grabbed this phone, brought it close. You expect us to believe you fell in love? With him? While planning his murder? I didn't plan to. Celeste's mask cracked slightly. It was supposed to be easy. Seduce him, marry him, walk away rich after the explosion. But somewhere in those 6 months, pretending to care became actually caring. Pretending to love became... She stopped. It doesn't matter. What matters is I can give you Luca, his location, his security details, everything you need to end him. In exchange, you let me walk away. You murdered 300 people, Damian said. Wrong. Luca murdered 300 people. I was just the weapon, and now I want revenge for making me into something I never wanted to be. The video feed cut out. New message appeared on screen. GPS coordinates. Time, 3 p.m. today. Location, abandoned warehouse district south side. Seraphina threw the phone back into the car. It's a trap. Obviously. So we don't go. We have to go. Damian turned to face her. If there's any chance she's telling the truth, there's no chance. She's Moretti's creature. This is bait to draw us into the open where he can kill us properly. Or she really does want out, want revenge. Want something beyond being his weapon. Damian grabbed Seraphina's shoulders. You said it yourself. She had 6 months to kill me quietly and never did. Maybe that means something. It means she was following orders, waiting for the perfect moment. Or it means she couldn't do it. Couldn't murder someone she'd started to care about. He held her gaze. You came back to save me after I destroyed your life. Why is it so hard to believe she might want to do the same thing? Because I'm an idiot. Seraphina pulled away. Because I let love make me weak. And because that weakness is going to get us both killed. She walked back to the Honda, got in, sat behind the wheel staring at nothing. Damian followed, climbed into the passenger seat. They sat in silence while traffic rumbled overhead and time leaked away. 3 o'clock gives us 3 hours, Damian said finally. 3 hours to scout the location, set up countermeasures, prepare for whatever trap she's planning. And when Moretti has snipers on every roof, when he's got 20 men inside waiting to turn us into Swiss cheese, then we die. But at least we die trying instead of hiding in that safe house waiting for him to hunt us down eventually. He looked at her profile, sharp and beautiful and exhausted. You've been fighting this war alone for 3 years. Let me fight it with you. Let me be what you need me to be. She turned slowly, eyes searching his face. You have no idea what you're asking. Then show me. Her hand moved fast, grabbed his collar, dragged him close. Her kiss was violent, desperate, tasting like blood and 3 years of grief. It lasted 5 seconds before she shoved him away. That, she said quietly, that's what this costs. Everything soft, everything good, everything that made us human before this war started. Her voice cracked. You want to fight beside me? You want to finish this? Then understand, we might win. We might destroy Moretti and walk away alive, but we'll never be who we were. Those people died the night I walked into that ballroom. I know, Damian said. No, you don't. But you will. She started the engine, pulled out of the shadows and back into daylight. And as they drove toward whatever trap Celeste had prepared, Damian realized Seraphina was right. The man he'd been, the billionaire, the philanthropist, the moral absolutist who'd destroyed his wife's life rather than question his own certainty, that man was already dead. What remained was something harder, something colder, something capable of walking into hell beside the woman he'd wronged and burning everything to ash just to make things right. The warehouse district squatted on Chicago's south side like a tumor, abandoned factories and rust-eaten rail lines and empty lots where nothing grew. Seraphina parked 3 blocks out, and they approached on foot through industrial decay. Every window was a potential sniper nest. Every shadow hid possible ambush. 3 o'clock arrived with winter sunlight struggling through pollution haze. The coordinates led to a warehouse identical to the one they'd burned last night. Same chain link, same corrugated metal, same sense of abandonment. Different trap, same war. They stood at the fence line studying the building. No visible guards, no obvious security, just one door hanging open like an invitation or a mouth. Last chance, Seraphina said. We can still walk away. Disappear. Run somewhere Moretti can't reach. I'm done running. Then stay behind me. Watch the corners. And Damian? She looked at him. If this goes wrong, if we're about to die, I need you to know something. What? But before she could answer, gunfire erupted from inside the warehouse. Not aimed at them, aimed at something inside, screaming. More shots, then silence. Seraphina's eyes went wide. Move! Now! They ran toward the open door, weapons raised, hit the entrance together, swept the interior with overlapping fields of fire. Bodies on the floor, 4 men in tactical gear, professionally killed with headshots. And in the center of the warehouse, sitting calm in a folding chair, was a woman Damian had never seen before. She was older than Celeste, harder, black hair pulled severe, scars mapping her face like a road map of violence. She held a gun loose in one hand, barrel still smoking. Hello, Seraphina, the woman said. Her voice carried an accent. Italian, Damian thought. It's been a long time. Seraphina had gone absolutely still. Her gun didn't waver, but something in her posture had changed, gone rigid with recognition or fear or both. Isabella, she whispered. The woman smiled. You remember? Good. I was worried I'd have to reintroduce myself. She gestured at the bodies. These were Celeste's people. She thought she could use you as bait to draw me out, kill me, take over my brother's empire for herself. Her smile widened. She forgot who taught her everything she knows. Your brother, Damian said slowly. Understanding crashed over him. Luca Moretti. Was my brother, past tense. Isabella Moretti stood, moved with predatory grace. He's been dead for 6 hours. I put 3 bullets in his head this morning while he slept. Took over his operation before anyone noticed. She looked at Seraphina. And now I'm here to finish what should have ended 3 years ago. You killed my father, Seraphina. Shot Vincent Vale and took his empire. You think I'd forget that? Seraphina's gun stayed trained on Isabella's center mass. Your father tried to kill me. I defended myself. By taking everything he built? By becoming the Night Diamond? By declaring war on every family in Chicago? Isabella laughed. You didn't defend yourself. You conquered. And now you're going to pay for that conquest with... The gunshot came from outside, from behind them. Damian felt the impact before he heard the sound. White-hot pain exploding through his chest, driving him to his knees. Blood spread across his shirt, hot and fast. His vision tunneled. The warehouse spun. Seraphina screamed his name, returned fire at something outside. More shots, glass shattering. Then she was beside him, hands pressed to his chest, trying to stop the bleeding. Stay with me, she said. Her voice sounded far away. Damian, stay with me. Don't you dare die. Don't you... But the darkness was rising fast, cold and absolute. The last thing he saw before it swallowed him was Seraphina's face above his. Not the hardened killer, not the Night Diamond, but the woman he'd married 4 years ago. The one who'd believed people could be saved. The woman he'd destroyed. And as consciousness fled, one thought remained crystal clear. He'd finally given her what she wanted. He'd lost everything, too. Damian woke to fluorescent lights and the smell of disinfectant cutting through blood. His chest felt like someone had driven a railroad spike through his ribs and left it there to rust. Every breath was broken glass grinding against his lungs. He tried to move and pain exploded white-hot across his vision. Don't. Seraphina's hand pressed against his shoulder, gentle but firm. You've got a sucking chest wound and 3 cracked ribs. Moving will kill you faster. His eyes focused slowly. They were in some kind of makeshift medical facility. Concrete walls, steel table, surgical equipment that looked like it had been stolen from a hospital. Seraphina stood over him, her hands covered in his blood up to the elbows. Her face was blank, locked down tight, but her eyes betrayed everything. Terror and fury and something that might have been grief. How long? His voice came out shredded. 40 minutes. I got the bullet out, packed the wound, pumped you full of antibiotics and morphine. She pulled back, started cleaning instruments with mechanical precision. You're not going to die. Not today. But you're not fighting for at least a week either. Memory crashed back. The warehouse. Isabella Moretti. The gunshot from outside. Who shot me? Celeste. She was on a rooftop 300 yards out with a Barrett 50 cal. Perfect shot. Center mass. Should have killed you instantly. Seraphina's jaw tightened. Your vest caught most of it. That's the only reason you're breathing. Where is she now? Gone. Isabella, too. They scattered when I started returning fire. She threw a bloody towel into a bin. Isabella killed her own brother, Damian. Luca Moretti is dead. She's taken over his entire operation and now she's hunting us personally. Why? Because I killed her father 3 years ago. Seraphina finally looked at him and he saw the weight she'd been carrying. Vincent Vale wasn't just my father. He was Isabella's mentor. Trained her since she was 15, made her into the thing she became. When I inherited his empire, when I became the Night Diamond, she took it as a personal betrayal. You never told me any of this. You never asked. She moved to a sink, started scrubbing the blood off her hands. You were too busy building your perfect life to notice your wife came from a family that built empires on corpses. The morphine was making his thoughts slow, sticky. But one thing cut through the fog, the way Seraphina's hands shook as she scrubbed. Barely visible, easy to miss. But there. You're scared, he said. I'm always scared. Fear keeps you alive. No, this is different. You're not scared of Isabella. You're scared of something else. Her hands stopped moving. Water ran over her knuckles, pink with diluted blood. We need to move. This location's compromised. Isabella knows I use it for emergency medical situations. Seraphina, I said we need to move. She turned, face hard again. Can you walk? Probably not. Then I'll carry you. She pulled him upright despite his groan of agony, got his arm around her shoulders, and half dragged, half walked him toward a steel door. Every step sent fire through his chest. His vision grayed at the edges, but he stayed conscious through sheer stubbornness and the morphine cocktail flooding his system. Outside was an alley rank with garbage and rain. Seraphina had the Honda idling, back seat already laid flat. She loaded him like cargo, slammed the door, and peeled out before he could ask where they were going. There's something you're not telling me, Damian said. Speaking hurt. Everything hurt. About Isabella. About why she wants you specifically. Lots of things I'm not telling you. We don't have time for confessions. Make time. Seraphina took a corner hard enough to throw him against the door. He gasped, clutching his chest. She didn't apologize. Just kept driving, eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror like she expected Isabella to materialize behind them any second. Fine, she said finally. You want the truth? Isabella and I were friends once, before I knew who my father was, before I understood what the veil name meant. Her knuckles went white on the steering wheel. We met at a gallery opening in New York. I was 22, fresh out of grad school, restoring Renaissance paintings. She was 25, claiming to be an art collector. We spent 6 months together, close, real close. The implication hit him through the morphine haze. You and Isabella were lovers. Yeah. She laughed without humor. Then my father died and I inherited his empire, and Isabella's real identity came out. Daughter of Luca Moretti, trained assassin, enforcer for one of Chicago's most violent crime families. Seraphina's voice went flat. She wanted me to merge the Veil and Moretti operations, wanted us to rule Chicago together. And when I refused, when I told her I couldn't be with someone who murdered for a living, she tried to kill me. But you killed Vincent first. Vincent tried to kill me when I wouldn't play his game, tried to force me into the life through violence. So yeah, I shot him, self-defense. But Isabella didn't see it that way. She saw me taking what was hers, the empire, the power, the legacy she thought we'd build together. Damian processed this through layers of pain and pharmaceutical fog. So this whole thing, Moretti coming after me, Celeste, the explosion, that was Isabella using her brother's resources to destroy us both. Smart boy, even with a hole in your chest. Seraphina took another sharp turn. Isabella's been orchestrating this from the start. Luca thought he was building a takeover. Really, he was just the blunt instrument Isabella used to flush me out of hiding. She knew I'd come back to save you, knew I couldn't let you die even after what you did to me. Because you loved me. Because I'm an idiot who can't let go. She pulled into an underground parking structure, descended 3 levels, and killed the engine in the darkest corner. Now she's got exactly what she wanted, me exposed, you helpless, both of us bleeding and desperate. She got out, came around, and helped him into a sitting position. The pain had dulled to a constant roar thanks to the morphine, but his body was a disaster. Every movement reminded him he was one wrong twist away from internal bleeding and death. Where are we? He asked. Backup safe house. One of 5 Isabella doesn't know about. Seraphina pulled him toward a maintenance store. Or maybe she does, and she's just waiting for us to think we're safe before she strikes. Hard to know anymore. The safe house was smaller than the last one, just a studio apartment with barred windows and enough weapons to arm a small militia. Seraphina locked them inside, checked every corner, then helped Damian onto a narrow bed. His vision swam. The ceiling spun. Sleep, she said. You need to heal. Can't. Too many questions. Then ask fast because you're about to pass out whether you like it or not. He grabbed her wrist before she could pull away. His grip was weak, pathetic, but she stopped. Marcus? Did he ever call back? Something flickered across her face. Yeah, he called. And? And he's FBI, Damian. Has been for 2 years. Undercover agent investigating your company for money laundering connections to organized crime. She pulled free of his grip. He survived the explosion because he was in the bathroom when it went off. Got blown through a wall but lived, and now he's leading the task force hunting us both. The betrayal hit harder than the bullet. Marcus. his best friend, the person he'd trusted with his entire business, his personal life, his secrets. He's been spying on me for 2 years? Looks that way. Did he know about Celeste, about Moretti's plan? I don't know. Maybe. Maybe he was trying to build a case and got caught in the crossfire. Seraphina moved to the window, peered through the blinds. Or maybe he was working with Isabella all along. Hard to tell who's betraying who at this point. Damian's chest felt hollow. Not from the gunshot wound, from understanding that every person he'd trusted, every relationship he'd built, had been compromised or corrupted or outright fabricated. His fiancée was a killer. His CFO was a federal agent. His wife had become a crime lord to survive his destruction of her life. Nothing was real. Nothing had ever been real. I need you to understand something, Seraphina said quietly, still watching the street. When I came back to warn you, I knew it would probably kill me. Knew Isabella was waiting for exactly that moment. But I did it anyway because somewhere under all this armor, I'm still the woman who believed you were worth saving. She turned to face him. That woman was wrong. You're not worth saving. Nobody is. We're all just monsters pretending to be human until the mask slips. That's not true, isn't it? You destroyed my life without hesitation. I murdered 37 people without losing sleep. Celeste seduced you while planning your death. Marcus wore a wire to your wedding. Isabella killed her own brother for power. Her laugh came out broken. We're all capable of anything given the right motivation. The only difference is some of us are honest about it. Then why save me? Why not let me die in that warehouse? She was quiet for a long moment. Because I'm still enough of an idiot to hope there's something left worth saving. In you, in me, in this whole fucked situation. She walked to the bed, sat on the edge. But hope's a luxury we can't afford anymore. Isabella won't stop until we're both dead. And even if we somehow kill her, there's 20 other people lined up to take her place. Moretti's empire doesn't die just because the leadership changes. It adapts, evolves, survives. So what do? We end it. All of it. She pulled out her phone, showed him a file. I've been compiling evidence for 3 years. Every crime, every transaction, every dirty cop and corrupt politician, enough to bring down not just Moretti's operation, but half the organized crime infrastructure in the Midwest. She swiped through images. I was going to use Marcus to release it, make it look like he discovered everything during your estate settlement, but now that he's FBI, we can go bigger. How? We give it directly to the media, every major outlet simultaneously, make it impossible to bury or spin. Her eyes were hard. Burn it all down. Moretti, Vale, every family connected to this war. Scorched earth. That includes you, your father's empire, your identity as the Night Diamond. I know. You'll go to prison, probably for life. I know. Then why? Because I'm tired, Damian. The words came out raw. I'm so fucking tired of being this person, of killing and running and surviving. I want it to end, even if that means ending me too. He stared at her, saw the exhaustion carved into every line of her face. 3 years of war had hollowed her out, left nothing but survival instinct and barely contained rage. The woman he'd married was still in there somewhere, buried under scar tissue and trauma. But bringing her back would require destroying the armor that kept her alive. There has to be another way, he said. There isn't. I've spent 3 years looking for one. This is it. We release everything, let the system tear itself apart, and hope we survive long enough to see it through. And Isabella? She'll come for us the moment the news breaks. She'll know we're behind it, know we just destroyed her power base. Seraphina smiled without warmth. So we make sure we're ready when she arrives. Damian tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Fire shot through his chest. He fell back gasping, vision whiting out. Seraphina's hands were there, steadying him, checking his bandages for fresh bleeding. You're not ready for anything, she said. You need rest. Real rest. Not morphine-induced unconsciousness. How long before you release the files? 48 hours. Gives me time to verify everything, make backup copies, set up dead man switches in case Isabella kills us before it goes live. And then? And then we wait for the world to burn. She stood, moved to a laptop on the table, and started working. Damian watched her through half-closed eyes, watched her fingers fly across the keyboard, organizing files, encrypting data, preparing to destroy everything she'd become. There was something almost peaceful about her focus, like she'd finally accepted what needed to happen and found relief in the certainty. His phone buzzed, still in his pocket somehow, miraculously intact. He pulled it out with shaking hands. Text message from another unknown number. I know you're alive, I know Seraphina's with you, and I know you think you're going to release those files and play hero. Meet me first. One conversation, that's all I'm asking. If you still want to burn it all down after we talk, I won't stop you. M. Marcus. Had to be.
Damian showed Seraphina the message. She read it, face unreadable. It's a trap. Everything's a trap at this point. So we ignore it. Or we find out what he wants. Damian struggled to think through the morphine and pain. Marcus knows how federal investigations work, knows how to build cases that actually stick. Maybe he can help. Help us commit professional suicide while putting ourselves in FBI custody? Great plan. Better than waiting here for Isabella to find us.
Seraphina closed her laptop, stood very still. When she spoke, her voice was carefully controlled. You want to trust him. After everything. After he lied to you for 2 years and wore a wire to your wedding and probably knew about Celeste the whole time. I don't want to trust anyone, but we're out of options. Either we talk to Marcus or we release those files and pray the explosion of publicity keeps Isabella at bay long enough for the law to actually work. The law doesn't work. Not against people like Isabella. Not against empires built on decades of corruption and violence. Then we make it work. We give the FBI everything they need to dismantle the entire structure. He met her eyes. But yeah, that means trusting Marcus. And yeah, that probably means you go to prison for the people you killed. But at least Isabella goes down with you. At least this ends. She stared at him for a long time. Outside, Chicago moved through another day. People working and loving and dying without any idea that their city's entire criminal infrastructure was about to implode. In the safe house, 2 broken people who'd destroyed each other's lives stood at the edge of either salvation or annihilation. Fine, Seraphina said finally. We meet Marcus. Hear him out. See if he's actually trying to help or just gathering evidence. She pulled a gun from the wall, checked the magazine. But Damian, when he tries to arrest us, and he will try, I'm not going quietly. I've spent 3 years fighting for survival. I'm not stopping now. What if he doesn't try? What if he actually wants to help? Then I'll be very surprised before Isabella kills us all. She texted back coordinates, a location of her choosing, public enough to prevent an ambush, but isolated enough for privacy. Navy Pier, the Carousel Building, 9 p.m. tonight. Marcus replied immediately. See you there. The hours crawled past. Damian drifted in and out of consciousness, morphine pulling him under, then spitting him back up into pain and confusion. Each time he surfaced, Seraphina was there, cleaning weapons, checking angles, preparing for every possible contingency. She moved like someone performing a ritual for the dead, going through familiar motions because the alternative was acknowledging how fucked they really were. At 8:30, they left the safe house. Seraphina had stolen a different car, a gray Camry so anonymous it practically disappeared. She drove with one hand, the other resting on a gun in her lap. Damian slouched in the passenger seat, chest screaming, watching Chicago blur past. Navy Pier was mostly empty on a cold Tuesday night. Tourist season was months away. Most of the attractions had shut down for the evening. The Carousel Building sat dark at the end of the pier, its painted horses frozen mid-gallop, empty music drifting from speakers like a ghost. Seraphina parked at the entrance, killed the engine. He's got 5 minutes, then we leave. They walked onto the pier together, Damian leaning heavily on Seraphina's shoulder. Every step felt like dying slowly. His vision kept tunneling, only stubbornness and terror kept him upright. Marcus was waiting inside the Carousel Building, hands in his pockets, looking like he'd aged 10 years in 2 days. He'd always been clean-cut, professional, the kind of person who ironed his jeans and color-coordinated his casual wear. Now he looked haunted, hollow. His eyes found Damian, and something cracked across his face, relief or guilt or both. Jesus Christ, Marcus said. You look like death. I've been shot. Tends to have that effect. Damian's voice came out weaker than he wanted. You're FBI. Was that a question or an accusation? Statement of fact. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, I'm FBI. Have been for 3 years. Went undercover in your company to investigate connections between Cross Development and organized crime money laundering. Find anything? Not from you. You're clean. Painfully clean. Marcus's smile was bitter. But you were surrounded by dirty money. Shell companies using your developments as fronts. Investors who were actually mob financiers. Contractors with ties to 3 different crime families. He gestured helplessly. You built an empire on legitimate business while everyone around you used it for criminal enterprise. And you didn't tell me. I couldn't. Blowing my cover would have collapsed the investigation and probably gotten me killed. Marcus took a step forward. Seraphina's gun came up instantly, barrel trained on his chest. He stopped. I'm not armed. I'm not here to arrest you. I'm here because I need your help. Our help. Seraphina's voice was ice. The people you've been investigating and betraying need to help you. That's rich. Damian's not my target. He never was. I was trying to protect him from getting dragged into indictments when we finally moved on the families. Marcus looked at Damian. You're my friend. That was never fake. I've been trying to keep you clean while building cases against everyone using you. Celeste, Damian said, was on my radar. I suspected she had connections to Moretti, but couldn't prove it. By the time I confirmed she was his plant, she'd already infiltrated your life. Marcus's jaw tightened. I tried to warn you, subtly. Kept suggesting you slow things down with her, do more background checks, wait before proposing. But you were in love. Or thought you were. I was being played. We all were. Celeste played you. Isabella played Luca. And I played you by pretending to be just a CFO. Marcus pulled out a phone, showed them a photograph. This is Isabella Moretti. She killed her brother 6 hours ago, took over his entire operation, and now she's planning something that makes the Blackthorn explosion look like a warm-up. The photograph showed Isabella standing in what looked like a command center, maps on screens, tactical equipment, armed men receiving orders. She looked calm, focused, utterly in control. What's she planning? Seraphina asked. A purge. She's going to kill every rival family head in Chicago in one coordinated strike. 5 families, 23 people, all in the next 48 hours. Marcus swiped to another image, a list of names and addresses. She's consolidating power, wants to rule the entire city's underworld with absolute authority. So stop her, you're FBI. That's literally your job. I can't touch her legally. She's covered her tracks too well. Every order goes through intermediaries. Every kill is done by contractors with no direct connection. Marcus looked between them. But you can. Seraphina knows her patterns, her safe houses, her people. You've been fighting her network for 3 years. And you want me to kill her? Seraphina's smile was sharp. Want me to do your dirty work while you build a nice, clean case that doesn't acknowledge federal agencies failed to stop a mob war? I want you to stop a massacre. And yeah, if that means Isabella dies, I'll look the other way. Damian felt the world tilting. This was the offer, the deal. Become the FBI's unofficial weapon while they maintain plausible deniability. Kill Isabella and walk away while Marcus took credit for dismantling Moretti's empire. What do we get? Damian asked. Immunity, full. Both of you. Marcus pulled out a folder. I've drafted an agreement. You cooperate fully, help us dismantle the Moretti organization and any remaining Veil Syndicate operations, and in exchange, Seraphina gets witness protection, new identity, clean slate. You get cleared of the Blackthorn bombing and terrorism charges. And the people she killed? Officially never happened. We bury it, classify it, make it disappear. Marcus held out the folder. This is the best deal you're going to get. Take it or spend the rest of your lives in prison or dead in a ditch. Seraphina snatched the folder, read through it fast. Her expression didn't change. When she finished, she looked at Marcus with something close to pity. You actually think this is going to work, she said. It's the only option that doesn't end with everyone dead. Wrong. It's the option that lets you sleep at night while we do the killing. She threw the folder at his feet. I've spent 3 years being a weapon, being the thing everyone points at their enemies and pulls the trigger. I'm done. Then what's your alternative? We release everything, every file, every connection, every dirty secret about Moretti, Veil, and the dozen other families operating in this city. Seraphina's voice was steel. We burn it all down and let the justice system actually do its job. The justice system will take years. Trials, appeals, bureaucracy. Marcus's composure was cracking. Isabella will kill dozens of people while you're waiting for warrants, and she'll come for you first. You think releasing files keeps you safe? It paints a target on your back the size of Chicago. I know. Then why? Because I'm tired of being afraid, tired of hiding, tired of becoming more of a monster every day just to survive. Seraphina stepped closer to Marcus, gun still raised. You want to stop Isabella? Do your job. Bring her in legally. Build a case that actually sticks. Don't ask me to murder her so you can maintain the illusion that law enforcement works. Marcus looked at Damian. Talk to her. Make her understand this is the only way. But Damian was looking at Seraphina, seeing her clearly for the first time since she'd walked back into his life. She'd been right earlier. Hope was a luxury they couldn't afford, but maybe defiance wasn't. Maybe choosing to burn everything down instead of playing assassin for the FBI was its own kind of survival. No, Damian said quietly. Marcus froze. What? I agree with her. We release the files. Let the chips fall. Face whatever comes. You're both insane. Isabella will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Probably, but at least we'll die as something other than the FBI's trained killers. Damian straightened despite the pain screaming through his chest. Thanks for the offer, Marcus. Really. But we're done being weapons. Marcus stared at them both like they'd lost their minds. Maybe they had. Maybe survival required insanity at this point. He bent down, picked up the folder, and tucked it away. Fine, he said. Release your files. Start your war. But when Isabella shows up, and she will, don't call me expecting rescue. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Damian, I really was your friend. That part was never a lie. I know. Marcus walked away. His footsteps echoed across the empty carousel building, fading into silence. Damian and Seraphina stood alone among the frozen horses, breathing hard, reality settling over them like a burial shroud. We just signed our death warrants, Seraphina said. Yeah. Isabella's going to come for us with everything she has. Probably. And we're going to die, probably badly, probably screaming. Most likely. She turned to look at him. In the dim light, she looked younger. More like the woman he'd married. Why did you back me? You could have taken Marcus's deal, walked away clean while I rotted in witness protection. Because you were right. We're not weapons. We're people. Fucked up, damaged, barely holding together people. But people. He reached out, took her hand. And if we're going to die, I'd rather die as someone who chose principle over survival. That's probably the stupidest thing you've ever said. Yeah, feels right, though. She laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was broken and wrong in all the ways that mattered, but it was real. Human. Proof that something still lived underneath the armor. Okay, she said. Let's burn it all down. They walked back to the car together. Made it maybe 20 feet before Seraphina's phone buzzed. She checked it, and her entire body went rigid. What? Damian asked. She showed him the screen. Text message from an unknown number. Just one line and an attached photograph. The line read, "Found your safe house. Pretty blood patterns on the walls. See you soon. I." The photograph showed the studio apartment where they'd been just hours ago. Completely destroyed. Walls riddled with bullets. The bed where Damian had been resting was shredded, and written in what looked like blood across the mirror. You can't hide. She knows, Seraphina whispered. She knows where we've been, where we're going, everything. How? Marcus. Had to be. He tracked us here. Probably has a tail on us right now. Damian looked around the empty pier, saw nothing but darkness and water. But that meant nothing. Snipers could be anywhere. Surveillance teams could be watching from a dozen angles. They'd walked straight into exposure thinking Marcus was the safest option. We need to move, Seraphina said, but her voice carried something new. Not fear, resignation. We need to release those files right now, tonight, before Isabella gets to us. Can you do it from here? If I can get to a secure connection, 20 minutes, maybe less. She started walking faster, pulling him toward the car. But Damian, you need to understand, once those files go live, there's no taking it back. Every criminal organization in the Midwest will want us dead. Every corrupt official we expose will come hunting. We'll be the most wanted people in Chicago. I know. And we'll probably die within a week. I know that too. They reached the Camry. Seraphina's hands were shaking as she fumbled for the keys. Not from fear, from adrenaline and anticipation and the terrible relief of finally reaching an endpoint. She got the door open, climbed in, and Damian collapsed into the passenger seat. She didn't start the engine immediately, just sat there, breathing hard, staring at nothing. "I loved you," she said quietly. "Before all this? Before the lies and the war and the killing. I loved you so much I thought it would kill me when you destroyed my life. I know. And I hate that I still love you. Hate that after everything, after becoming this thing I never wanted to be, I still care whether you live or die. Seraphina, I'm not done." She turned to face him. Tears tracked down her face, cutting through 3 years of armor like acid. "When we release these files, when Isabella comes for us, I need you to run. I need you to take whatever chance you can and get out. Let me handle her." "No. You're not built for this. You'll just slow me down." "Then I'll die slow, but I'm not leaving you to face this alone. You already did. 3 years ago. When you stood in front of those cameras and called me a thief and a liar. When you made the whole world hate me." Her voice cracked. "So don't pretend nobility now. Don't act like you're some kind of hero. You're just a man who finally realized he was wrong after it was too late to matter." The words hit like bullets. Each one true. Each one devastating. Damian had no defense because she was absolutely right. He'd destroyed her when she was innocent. Now he wanted to die beside her when she was guilty. The mathematics didn't balance. The scales would never be even. "You're right," he said. I'm not a hero. I'm just someone who finally understands what he lost. And maybe that's not enough. Maybe nothing I do will ever be enough. But I'm not running. Not again." Seraphina stared at him. Then she started the engine and pulled out into Chicago's night. They drove in silence through empty streets, both of them knowing they were heading toward an ending that would probably involve blood and screaming and the kind of violence that destroyed whatever humanity they had left. But at least they'd face it together. At least this time, Damian wouldn't be the one who ran. Seraphina found an internet cafe in Chinatown that stayed open 24 hours. The kind of place where nobody asked questions and surveillance cameras mysteriously stopped working. She set up at a terminal in the back corner, fingers flying across the keyboard while Damian kept watch. "How long?" he asked. 10 minutes to upload. Another 5 to distribute through encrypted channels. Then it's done. She worked with the focused intensity of someone performing brain surgery. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Chicago breathing and bleeding through another night. Damian's chest throbbed in rhythm with his pulse. The morphine was wearing off, leaving nothing but raw pain and clarity. "There," Seraphina said. "Files are uploading now. Once they hit the distribution network, every major news outlet in the country gets a copy. FBI, DOJ, state prosecutors. Everyone. Can it be stopped? Not unless someone nukes the internet in the next 8 minutes." Damian watched the progress bar crawl across the screen. 30%, 40. Each percentage point was another nail in their coffins, another guarantee that Isabella would come hunting with everything she had. His phone buzzed. He checked it reflexively. Text message from Marcus. "I know what you're doing. Don't. You'll start a war that kills thousands." Damian showed Seraphina. She smiled without warmth. "War's already started," she said. "We're just making sure everyone knows who's been fighting it." 50%, 60. The screen flickered. Seraphina's hands froze. "What?" Damian asked. "Upload stopped." "Why?" She typed frantically, pulling up diagnostics. "Someone's blocking the connection. Sophisticated attack, routing through..." Her face went pale. "It's coming from inside the FBI network. Marcus, or someone working with him." She tried different protocols, different servers. Each one got blocked within seconds. "They're shutting me down, keeping the files from going out." "Can you fight it?" "Not from here. I'd need better equipment, better access." She slammed her hand on the desk. "Fuck, we were so close." The cafe's front door opened. Seraphina's gun was out instantly, trained on the entrance. A man walked in. Late 40s, gray suit, FBI credentials hanging from his neck. Behind him were 6 more agents in tactical gear, weapons drawn. "Seraphina Vale," the man said calmly. "Damian Cross. I'm Special Agent Patterson. You're both under arrest." Seraphina didn't lower her weapon. "On what charges?" "Terrorism." multiple counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, racketeering. Should I continue? Patterson held up a hand and his team fanned out, surrounding them. Put the weapon down. This doesn't have to end with more blood. How'd you find us? Damian asked. Marcus Chen has been tracking you since Navy Pier. Thought maybe you'd see reason. Turns out he was right to have us follow. Patterson's smile was thin. Now, gun down, hands up. Let's do this professionally. Seraphina's finger was on the trigger. Damian could see the calculation happening behind her eyes. How many agents she could drop before they returned fire. Whether creating chaos would give him a chance to escape. If dying here was better than prison. Don't, he said quietly. They'll lock us up and throw away the key. Better than dead. Not by much. Please. She looked at him, saw something in his face that made her hesitate. Then slowly, so slowly it looked like surrender was physically painful, she lowered the gun and raised her hands. The agents swarmed immediately, cuffed them both, read their rights while pulling them toward the door. Patterson collected Seraphina's laptop, checked the screen, and smiled. Nice try with the data dump, he said. But the Bureau's been monitoring your activities for weeks. Every file you've compiled, every source you've identified. We've known about your evidence since before you walked into that engagement party. Seraphina's face went blank. That's impossible. Is it? Patterson gestured for his team to load them into separate vehicles. Who do you think gave Marcus Chen all his information on Isabella Moretti? Who do you think has been protecting you both from assassins while building a case against every crime family in the Midwest? He leaned close. You've been an asset, Ms. Vale. A very useful, very violent asset, and now you've served your purpose. The words hit like a sledgehammer. Damian watched understanding break across Seraphina's face. The realization that she'd been played from the beginning. That her 3-year war against Moretti wasn't rebellion. It was work. She'd been the FBI's weapon all along, just too close to the violence to see the strings. No, she whispered. No, that's not… Take them, Patterson ordered. They were separated, thrown into different vehicles. Damian watched through the window as Seraphina screamed something at Patterson, her face twisted with fury and betrayal. Then his vehicle pulled away and she disappeared into darkness. He sat alone in the back of an FBI van, cuffed and bleeding, while Chicago slid past outside. 3 years of running, 3 years of fighting, all of it orchestrated by the people who were supposed to represent justice. Marcus had been right about one thing. They'd been weapons. They just hadn't realized who was pulling the trigger. The van drove for 40 minutes before stopping. When the doors opened, Damian wasn't looking at a federal building. He was looking at an abandoned warehouse in a part of Chicago even cops avoided. That's when he knew. This wasn't an arrest. This was an execution. Patterson climbed into the back, sat across from him. Here's what's going to happen, Mr. Cross. You're going to die tonight, killed by Isabella Moretti during a confrontation that went wrong. Very tragic, very heroic. You'll be remembered as a victim, not a terrorist. And Seraphina? We'll die separately. Different location, different story, but same result. Patterson pulled out a gun, checked the magazine. The Bureau can't have you both alive. Can't risk you talking about our arrangement with Ms. Vale. Can't risk anyone learning we've been using organized crime to dismantle organized crime. Marcus knows. Marcus is a good soldier. He'll file the right reports, say the right things. Patterson smiled. He was genuinely torn up about this, for what it's worth. Really did consider you a friend. But orders are orders. Damian's mind raced, hands cuffed behind his back, bullet wound in his chest. No weapons, no backup, no way out. This was it. The end. Everything he'd survived, everything he'd learned, all leading to dying in a warehouse while the FBI covered its tracks. I want you to know, Patterson continued, you and Ms. Vale actually accomplished something. You helped us build cases against 17 different criminal organizations, helped us identify hundreds of corrupt officials. The takedown starting tomorrow will reshape organized crime in the Midwest for a generation. He raised the gun. So thank you for your service. Damian closed his eyes, thought about Seraphina, hoped she at least went down fighting, hoped she took some of them with her. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. But Damian didn't feel anything. He opened his eyes. Patterson was on the floor, blood pooling from a head wound. Behind where he'd been standing was Isabella Moretti, holding a smoking gun. "Hello, Damian," she said pleasantly. "Ready to talk?" Damian stared at Patterson's corpse, then at Isabella Moretti, standing over it like an avenging angel dressed in black leather and gunpowder. His brain struggled to process the reversal. The woman who'd spent 3 years hunting them had just saved his life by executing an FBI agent. "You look confused," Isabella said. She stepped over Patterson's body, moved closer. The gun stayed loose in her hand, barrel pointed at the floor, but ready to rise in a heartbeat. "That's understandable. The narrative's gotten complicated." "Why?" Damian's voice came out hoarse. "Why save me?" Because Patterson and his people were about to close the biggest loophole in federal law enforcement history. She crouched in front of him, studied his face like a scientist examining a specimen. "The FBI's been running an off-books assassination program for 6 years, using organized crime to eliminate organized crime. Seraphina was their best weapon. She just didn't know it. That's insane." "Is it?" Isabella reached behind him, unlocked his cuffs with a key she'd taken from Patterson's body. "Think about it. Woman gets framed for crime she didn't commit, disappears, suddenly starts systematically killing her father's rivals and her husband's enemies, all while the FBI watches and takes notes and uses her targets to build RICO cases." She pulled the cuffs free. Seraphina thought she was surviving. Really, she was doing exactly what they programmed her to do. Damian rubbed his wrists, trying to restore circulation. Every movement sent fire through his chest wound. "And you figured this out how?" "Because I helped set it up." Isabella stood, walked to a table where more weapons were laid out. 3 years ago, Marcus Chen approached me through intermediaries, said the Bureau wanted Luca gone but couldn't touch him legally, offered me a deal, helped them manipulate Seraphina into becoming their weapon, and when the dust settled, I'd inherit the entire Moretti Empire with federal protection. So you orchestrated everything. The frame job, the evidence against Seraphina, all of it. Not all. Your destruction of her life? That was pure you, Damian. That was real. Her smile was sharp. But yeah, I helped feed evidence to your lawyers, helped make sure the trail led back to Seraphina, made it so thorough you'd never question it. She picked up a combat knife, tested the edge. And then I waited. Waited for her to run. Waited for her father to make his move. Waited for the perfect moment to kill Vincent and frame it as self-defense. You killed Vincent Vale. With Seraphina's gun. In her apartment. While she was passed out from drugs, I'd slipped into her wine. Isabella's eyes glittered. She woke up covered in her father's blood with no memory of the night. Perfect trauma. Perfect motivation to become exactly what the FBI needed. Damian felt sick. Not from his wounds, from understanding the scope of the manipulation. Seraphina's entire war had been theater. Every person she'd killed, every sacrifice she'd made, orchestrated by the woman standing in front of him. Why are you telling me this? Because the deal changed. Isabella set the knife down. Patterson and his team were supposed to arrest you both, stage your deaths, close the program. But they got greedy, started expanding operations, started using the same playbook in 6 other cities, and the Bureau brass decided that was too much exposure, too many loose ends. She gestured at Patterson's corpse. So they ordered the cleanup crew cleaned up. Everyone who knew about the program dies, including me. But you killed Patterson first. I've been 3 steps ahead of federal surveillance for years. You don't survive in this business by trusting anyone. She pulled out her phone, showed him a photograph. See this? Federal kill team, 12 operators. They're hitting Seraphina's location in 20 minutes. Going to make it look like a shootout with Moretti loyalists. The photograph showed armed men in tactical gear loading into vans, professional, methodical. The kind of operators who didn't leave witnesses or evidence. Where is she? Damian demanded. Facility on the south side, industrial district near the old steel mills. Isabella zoomed in on a map. Heavily fortified, multiple exits, perfect place for a clean execution. She looked up at him. You want to save her? We move now, together. Why would you help me save Seraphina after spending 3 years destroying her? Because I loved her. The words came out flat, simple, devastating. Before all this, before I became what I am, I loved her and she chose you instead. And that rejection turned into the kind of hatred that builds empires and burns cities. Isabella's jaw tightened. But hatred's exhausting, Damian, and watching her become the Night Diamond, watching her survive everything I threw at her, watching her choose to save you even after you destroyed her. She stopped. She deserves better than dying in an FBI black site. You're insane. Probably. But I'm also your only chance. Those operators hit in 18 minutes. It takes 15 to get there. You coming or not? Damian tried to stand. His legs buckled. Isabella caught him, surprisingly strong for her size, and hauled him upright. She handed him a gun, Glock 19, same model Seraphina had given him days ago, an eternity ago. Can you shoot? Isabella asked. I killed a man 3 days ago. Still see his face when I close my eyes. Good. That means you're still human. Hold on to that. She pulled him toward a door at the back of the warehouse. But also be ready to kill more. Because we're going through about 20 federal operators and whoever's left of Moretti's security detail. Outside was a black SUV with tinted windows. Isabella threw Damian into the passenger seat and peeled out before he could buckle. Chicago streaked past. Industrial wasteland giving way to abandoned factories, the skeletal remains of America's manufacturing heart left to rust and rot. How many people are guarding Seraphina? Damian asked. 6 FBI agents, plus whatever surveillance and backup they have staged. Isabella took a corner at 60, tires screaming. But they're expecting a clean arrest, easy elimination, not a breach from outside. So we have surprise. For about 30 seconds. Then everyone starts shooting and it's chaos. She glanced at him. You ready for that? Really ready? Because there's no halfway here. Either we go in committed to killing every person between us and Seraphina, or we die in the parking lot. Damian checked his gun, counted rounds, 15 plus 1 in the chamber. Not enough, never enough. What happens after? Say we get her out, say we survive, then what? Then we run. All 3 of us. Disappear so deep the FBI can't find us without nuking entire countries. Isabella's smile was grim. I've got networks, safe houses across 4 continents, money hidden in accounts even the CIA can't trace. We can survive this, but only if we're willing to give up everything else. I gave up everything the night she walked into my engagement party. No. You gave up your old life. Now you have to give up your identity, your name, your face, everything that makes you Damian Cross. She looked at him. You ready for that? He thought about who he'd been. Billionaire real estate developer, philanthropist, the kind of man who got his picture in business magazines and shook hands with senators. That person had been a fiction, a careful construction built on foundations of privilege and certainty and the absolute conviction that he knew the difference between right and wrong. That person had been an idiot. Yeah, Damian said, I'm ready. They hit the industrial district doing 80. Isabella killed the headlights and navigated by memory and moonlight. The facility appeared ahead, a concrete bunker surrounded by chain link and razor wire, the kind of place that didn't appear on any official maps. 2 vans were parked out front. The kill team was already here. Shit, Isabella hissed. They moved early. She parked 2 blocks out and they approached on foot. Damian's chest was screaming, bandages soaked through with blood and sweat. Each step was agony. But he kept moving because the alternative was letting Seraphina die alone while he bled out in an alley. Gunfire erupted from inside the facility. Not the controlled bursts of an execution, the chaotic spray of a firefight. Someone was resisting. She's still alive, Isabella said. Still fighting. They hit the fence. Isabella produced wire cutters from somewhere, snipped through the chain link in seconds. They squeezed through, weapons up, moving toward a side entrance. The door was reinforced steel with a keypad lock. Isabella didn't bother with codes. She placed a small charge, stepped back, and blew the lock. The explosion was deafening. Damian's ears rang. Then they were through, moving down a concrete corridor lit by emergency lights. More gunfire ahead. Shouting. Something heavy hitting a wall. They rounded a corner and walked into hell. The main room was a slaughterhouse. 4 FBI agents down, bleeding out from knife wounds and gunshot trauma. 2 more were pinned behind overturned tables, firing at Seraphina. She'd taken cover behind a steel support column, gun in one hand, knife in the other, blood streaming down her face from a gash above her eye. She saw Damian and Isabella, and her expression went through 5 different emotions in 3 seconds. Shock, confusion, rage, desperation, and something that might have been hope. "Cover!" Isabella shouted and opened fire on the agents. Damian added his gun to the chaos. His shots went wide. No training, no practice, just desperation and geometry. But it was enough. The agents turned toward the new threat. Seraphina used the distraction to move, vaulted over her cover, and put 2 rounds through the nearest agent's chest before he could adjust his aim. The last agent tried to run. Made it maybe 5 feet before Isabella shot him in the back. He went down hard, didn't move again. Silence crashed over the room. 4 people standing among corpses, breathing hard, covered in other people's blood. Seraphina stared at Isabella like she was seeing a ghost. "You," she said. Just that. One word containing years of betrayal and hatred and unfinished business. "Me." Isabella lowered her gun. "We need to leave. Now. Kill team's en route, probably 2 minutes out." "Why are you here?" "Because Patterson tried to kill us all. Because the FBI is closing down their off-books program and we're the loose ends." Isabella moved toward the exit, checking corners. "Explanations later. Running now. You coming?" Seraphina looked at Damian. Her eyes were wild, barely holding on to sanity. "Did you know? About Patterson? About the FBI using me?" "No, I swear. I found out 5 minutes before Isabella killed him." "And you believed her? The woman who spent 3 years destroying us?" "I believe she just saved our lives." Damian stepped closer, ignoring the way his chest wound, pulsed with each heartbeat. "I believe we're out of options. Either we trust her right now or we die in this building. Trusting her is what got us here in the first place." "Wrong!" Isabella's voice cut through sharp. "Trusting the system got you here. Trusting that the FBI were the good guys. Trusting that justice meant something." She chambered a fresh round. "I'm a lot of things, Seraphina, but at least I'm honest about being a monster. Can the Bureau say the same?" Seraphina's hand tightened on her gun. For a second, Damian thought she might shoot Isabella just on principle. Instead, she holstered the weapon and started walking toward the exit. "If you betray us," she said quietly, "I will kill you so slowly, you'll beg for hell." "Fair." They hit the parking lot running. The SUV was where Isabella left it. They piled in, Seraphina driving, Isabella riding shotgun. Damian collapsed in the back, trying not to pass out. Seraphina floored it, tires smoking as they rocketed toward the main road. Behind them, 3 black vans screamed into the parking lot. Doors flew open. Operators poured out in tactical formation. Then the facility exploded, a massive fireball that lit up the Chicago skyline like a second sun. "Secondary charges," Isabella said calmly. "I rigged the building while they were setting up. Figured either we'd need the distraction or they'd kill us and at least take some of them with us." Seraphina drove like a woman possessed. They hit the highway doing 90, weaving through light traffic, putting distance between themselves and the inferno. Damian watched through the rear window as emergency vehicles converged on the blast site. Ambulances, fire trucks, police. Too late to matter. Too late to save anyone. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Airport," Isabella said. "I've got a plane fueled and waiting. No flight plan filed. Off the books. We're in the air in 30 minutes or we're in prison." "What about the evidence?" Seraphina's knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "The files I compiled. 3 years of work. Already distributed." Isabella pulled out a phone. Not hers, Damian noticed. Patterson's. "I grabbed his device when I killed him. Had full access to the FBI network. Sent your files to every news outlet and prosecutor's office in 6 states before we left for the extraction." "You released my evidence?" "Our evidence. I added my own files to the package. 20 years of Moretti family records. Every crime, every payoff, every murder." Isabella's smile was bitter. "If we're burning it down, might as well burn it all." "You just destroyed your own empire." "My brother's empire. I never wanted it." She looked out the window at Chicago racing past. "I wanted you. And when I couldn't have you, I wanted revenge. And when revenge stopped satisfying, I wanted to stop being this person." Her voice cracked slightly. "So yeah, I burned it down. Better than letting the FBI weaponize it for another decade." They hit O'Hare's private aviation terminal 23 minutes later. Isabella's plane was exactly where she promised, a Gulfstream G650 with Russian registration and maintenance logs showing it had been in Moscow for the past month. Completely illegal, completely untraceable. They boarded fast. The pilot didn't ask questions, just got clearance and taxied toward the runway. As Chicago fell away beneath them, Damian felt something release in his chest. Not relief. Relief would have been premature, but the immediate death sentence had been commuted. They'd survived the next 5 minutes. Now they just had to survive the rest of their lives. Seraphina collapsed into a leather seat, hands shaking. She'd held it together through the firefight, through the escape, through the mad dash to the airport. Now the adrenaline was crashing and everything underneath was showing through. Isabella moved to a bar built into the plane's cabin, poured 3 fingers of scotch into a glass. She handed it to Seraphina. Drink. I don't want... It's not a suggestion. Drink or you're going into shock. Seraphina took the glass, drained it in one swallow, coughed, took another pour and drank that too. Color started returning to her face. Her hands steadied slightly. Now talk, Seraphina said. Tell me everything. How you manipulated me, how the FBI used me, all of it. Isabella sat across from her. For the first time since Damian had met her, she looked tired, old, the mask slipping to reveal the exhaustion underneath. You want the long version or the one that doesn't make me want to shoot myself? The true version. Those aren't mutually exclusive. Isabella poured herself a drink. Fine. From the beginning. 4 years ago, Marcus Chen identified a pattern. Organized crime families using legitimate businesses to launder money. Your husband's company was on that list, not because Damian was dirty, but because everyone around him was. I know this part. Then you know Marcus needed someone inside the underworld. Someone with access, with connections, with reason to fight. Isabella took a drink. That's when I approached him, told him about you. About how Vincent Vale's daughter was married to a billionaire and didn't even know her father ran half of Chicago's criminal infrastructure. Seraphina's face went pale. You told them about my father? I told them everything. Your background, your relationship with Vincent, how he'd kept you away from the business your entire life because he wanted you clean. Isabella's voice was clinical, detached. I told them you'd be perfect, that all they needed to do was destroy your life completely, force you into survival mode, and you'd become exactly what they needed. A weapon. The best weapon, one that didn't know it was being aimed. Seraphina stood abruptly, crossed the cabin. Her hand went to her gun, but didn't draw it. You did this. You destroyed everything I was, made me into a killer, made me into... Her voice broke. I have 37 bodies on my conscience because of you. You have 37 dead criminals on your conscience, Isabella corrected. 37 people who trafficked drugs and murdered rivals and destroyed lives. You think I feel bad about that? I feel bad about it. I never wanted to be that person. Then you shouldn't have been so good at it. Isabella stood to face her. You think I manipulated some innocent woman? You had your father's instincts, Seraphina. His ruthlessness, his talent for violence. I just gave you permission to use them. Seraphina moved fast, had Isabella against the cabin wall with the knife to her throat before Damian could react. The blade pressed just hard enough to draw blood. Give me one reason, Seraphina hissed. One reason I shouldn't open you up right here. Because you need me. Isabella didn't struggle, didn't even look scared. I've got safe houses, contacts, money. I've got everything required to keep us alive and off the grid. Kill me and you're running blind with half the intelligence community hunting you. Maybe I don't want to run anymore. Then what, go back? Face trial for 3 years of vigilante justice? Watch Damian go to prison as an accessory? Isabella's eyes were steady. Or maybe you just want to die. Put the knife under your own ribs and end this whole nightmare. Maybe I do. Then do it. Isabella spread her arms. Cut my throat first. Make me bleed out watching. Then turn the knife on yourself. I won't stop you. But that means Damian dies too. Because without my network, without my protection, the FBI finds him in 48 hours and he vanishes into a black site forever. Seraphina's hand trembled. The knife drew another line of blood. Isabella didn't flinch. Seraphina. Damian's voice cut through the tension. Don't. She destroyed us. She gave us a chance to survive. Might be the only one we get. By manipulating everything, by turning me into a monster. You're not a monster. You're someone who did what she had to in order to survive. He moved closer, careful not to startle her. But if you kill her now, we lose everything. And I'm not ready to lose you again. Seraphina's eyes met his. Damian saw the weight she carried. Every kill, every compromise, every piece of herself she'd sacrificed to stay alive. Saw how close she was to just giving up, letting the knife slip and ending it all. I'm so tired, she whispered. I know. I don't know how to be anything except this anymore. Then we figure it out together, but first we have to survive. He held out his hand. Trust me, just one more time. She stared at his hand like it was a trap. Maybe it was. Maybe trust was just another word for giving someone the power to destroy you. But after a long moment, she lowered the knife, stepped back from Isabella, collapsed into a seat with her head in her hands. Isabella touched her throat, looked at the blood on her fingers. Convincing argument. Shut up, Damian said. Tell us where we're going. Argentina first, Buenos Aires. I've got a contact who can provide new identities, passports, backgrounds, the works. From there we scatter, never stay together, never establish patterns. She grabbed a tablet, pulled up maps. I'm thinking you two head to Southeast Asia, Thailand, maybe Vietnam, somewhere the extradition treaties are more suggestion than law. And you? Eastern Europe. I've got business interests that need liquidating, accounts that need emptying. Then maybe Morocco. Always liked Casablanca. So we just run forever. Better than dying tomorrow. Isabella met his eyes. You want a happy ending, Damian? Want to go back to your penthouse and your perfect life? That option died when Patterson tried to kill you. This is what's left. Running, hiding, and hoping we stay ahead of the people hunting us long enough to build something new. The plane leveled off at cruising altitude. Through the windows, Damian could see stars scattered across the darkness. They'd left Chicago behind, left America behind. Everything familiar was gone. He looked at Seraphina, still sitting with her head in her hands. She looked smaller somehow, diminished, like fighting for 3 years straight had hollowed her out from the inside. What do you want? He asked quietly. She lifted her head. Her eyes were red but dry. No more tears left. I want to stop running. Stop fighting. Stop being afraid every second of every day. She laughed bitterly. But that's not an option anymore, is it? Maybe in Argentina. Maybe after we've been dead long enough that people stop looking. They'll never stop looking. Patterson and his team were just the first wave. There'll be others. She stood, moved to the window, stared out at nothing. We're ghosts now, dead but still walking, and sooner or later someone's going to notice and put us down for real. Then we make it later. We buy time and figure out how to actually live instead of just survive. You think there's a difference? There has to be. Isabella had been quiet during this exchange, watching them like a scientist observing an experiment. Now she cleared her throat. For what it's worth, she said, I'm sorry. Not for everything. Some of those people deserved what they got, but for turning you into weapons, for using your love against you, for making you into something you never wanted to be. She looked at Seraphina. I told myself it was justice. Revenge for you choosing him over me. Really, it was just cruelty dressed up as strategy. You expecting forgiveness? Seraphina asked. No. Just wanted you to know I understand what I took from you, and that if I could undo it, I would. But you can't. No, none of us can. Isabella stood. So we do what criminals have done since the beginning of time. We run, we hide, and we try to build something better from the ashes of what we destroyed. The plane flew through the night. They landed in Buenos Aires 14 hours later, depleted and hollow and alive. Isabella's contact met them at a private hangar, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and hands that had clearly done violence. She didn't ask questions, just handed them 3 manila envelopes containing new identities and wished them luck. Damian became Martin Cross, Canadian businessman with extensive holdings in tech startups. Seraphina became Sarah Vale, art restorer from Toronto. Different enough to avoid connection, similar enough to remember who they'd been. They split up at the airport, Isabella heading east, Damian and Seraphina heading west toward Lima, then north to Mexico City, then finally across the Pacific to Bangkok. 36 hours of travel, 36 hours of looking over their shoulders, 36 hours of expecting bullets or badges at every checkpoint. But they made it. Thailand swallowed them into humidity and chaos. Bangkok was a city of 15 million people where 2 more foreigners vanished like rain into the ocean. They found an apartment in Sukhumvit, paid cash for 6 months, and finally, allowed themselves to breathe. That first night, they sat on the balcony watching Bangkok's lights sprawl to the horizon. Neither of them spoke. Words felt inadequate. Everything that needed to be said had been said in blood and bullets and desperate escapes. "We're not going to make it," Seraphina said eventually. "Why not?" "Because we're broken, both of us, beyond repair." She lit a cigarette with shaking hands. "You've got a bullet wound that needs proper medical attention. I've got PTSD that makes sleeping feel like dying. And we're sharing space like we're still married when really we're just 2 strangers who survived the same war." "Maybe that's enough." "It's not. You know it's not." She took a long drag. "Eventually you'll realize you could have had a normal life. Could have made a deal with Marcus, gone into witness protection, maybe even rebuilt your company under a different name. But you chose this, chose running and hiding and living on borrowed time. I chose you. You chose guilt, chose trying to fix what you broke." She looked at him. "That's not the same as love, Damian. That's just penance." He wanted to argue, wanted to tell her she was wrong, but she wasn't. Part of him was here because he loved her. But another part, maybe the bigger part, was here because watching her suffer alone felt like dying slowly. And death by proximity was still death. "So what do?" he asked. "We survive. We heal. And when the time comes that you want to leave, I won't stop you." She stubbed out the cigarette. "I've taken enough from you. I won't take your freedom too." She went inside, left him alone with Bangkok's noise and light. Damian sat there until dawn, thinking about choices and consequences and the woman who'd saved his life by destroying it. 3 weeks passed. They established routines. Damian found a doctor willing to treat his wound without questions. Seraphina enrolled in a Muay Thai gym, channeling her violence into something controlled. They shared the apartment like roommates, polite, distant, 2 people occupying the same space without really touching. Then Isabella called. Seraphina answered on speaker. Isabella's voice sounded wrong, strained. "We have a problem." "What kind?" "The files we released? They work too well. Half of Chicago's political structure is under indictment. 17 crime families are being prosecuted. And someone noticed that the Night Diamonds evidence appeared the same night 3 people disappeared from FBI custody. So they know we're alive. They know someone's alive. And they're hunting." Isabella paused. "Marcus Chen specifically. He survived the facility explosion, and now he's leading a task force dedicated to finding us." Seraphina closed her eyes. "How long?" "Days. Maybe a week. I've got people watching for unusual activity, but he's good. He'll find us. Then we move again. And he'll find us there too, and again after that. There's no running from this, Seraphina. Not anymore." Isabella's voice dropped. "There's only one way this ends. We go back. We face Marcus, and we end it permanently." "You mean kill him?" "I mean remove the threat, however that needs to happen." Damian grabbed the phone. "There has to be another way. Name one that doesn't involve spending the rest of our lives running from every shadow." Isabella waited. "You can't, because there isn't one. Marcus won't stop. The Bureau won't stop. They can't afford to let us live knowing what we know about their programs. So we trade one war for another. We finish the war we started." Isabella's tone sharpened. "I'm flying to Chicago tonight. I'll be there in 30 hours. You've got that long to decide if you're coming with me or running alone." She hung up. The silence in the apartment was total. Outside, Bangkok continued. Street vendors calling, motorcycles revving, life happening to people who weren't being hunted by federal agencies. "She's right," Seraphina said quietly. "We can't run forever. Going back is suicide. Staying here is slow suicide. At least going back we control the terms." She stood, started packing. "I'm going. You can stay if you want. Probably should. You've got a chance at a real life here if you're not connected to me. And watch you die on the news a week later? Better than dying beside me in some Chicago alley." Damian watched her throw clothes into a bag with mechanical efficiency. She'd already made the decision, already committed to going back and facing whatever waited. Part of him wanted to let her, wanted to stay in Bangkok and build the quiet life he'd always pretended to want, but that would mean losing her again. And he'd already done that once. It had nearly destroyed him. "I'm coming," he said. She stopped packing. "Damian, I'm coming. We started this together. We finish it together." "You're going to die." "Probably, but at least I'll die as someone who chose principle over comfort." He grabbed his own bag. "That's got to count for something." She stared at him, then slowly, so slowly it looked like surrender, she nodded. They flew out that night. Bangkok to Tokyo to Los Angeles to Chicago, 31 hours of travel, each mile bringing them closer to either resolution or execution. Isabella met them at O'Hare, looking harder than before, like the weeks in hiding had worn away whatever softness remained. "You came," she said. "Did you doubt it?" Seraphina asked. "Little bit, yeah." Isabella led them to a parking garage. "I've got equipment staged at a safe house in Bridgeport. Marcus is operating out of a federal building downtown. Heavy security, lots of cameras. Basically impossible to breach." "So we draw him out," Damian said. How? "We give him what he wants. We surrender." Both women stared at him like he'd lost his mind. "Explain," Isabella said carefully. "Marcus wants us in custody so he can close this quietly. Make us disappear. Protect the Bureau's secrets." Damian's mind was racing, puzzle pieces clicking together. But if we surrender publicly, surrounded by media, cameras, witnesses, he can't just kill us. He has to actually arrest us, process us legally. "And then we're in federal custody with no way out," Seraphina said. "Unless we have leverage, something that guarantees our safety because killing us would release it." He looked at Isabella. "You said you had files, 20 years of Moretti family records. What if we add Patterson's files, everything the FBI did through their off-books program?" Isabella's eyes went wide. "A dead man's switch. We release everything if anything happens to us. Mutually assured destruction. We stay quiet about federal programs. They leave us alone to serve our sentences quietly. That's insane." "That's our only play." Damian met Seraphina's eyes. "Unless you've got a better one." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "We'd go to prison. Probably for decades. Beats dying." "Does it?" She looked out at Chicago's skyline. "After everything we've done, everything we've become, maybe we deserve execution more than mercy. Maybe. But I'd rather find out what we become after this. See if there's anything left worth saving." Seraphina turned back to them. Her face was set, determined. "Fine. We surrender. We play the leverage. And if it doesn't work, if Marcus kills us anyway, at least we die trying." Isabella pulled out her phone. "I'll set up the meet. Federal Plaza. Noon tomorrow. As public as it gets. And if he doesn't show? Then we release everything and hope the fallout is big enough to keep us alive through the shitstorm." They spent the night in Isabella's safe house, a converted warehouse in an industrial wasteland. Weapons covered every surface. Surveillance equipment hummed in corners. It looked like a place where people came to plan wars or die trying. Damian couldn't sleep, kept seeing Patterson's corpse, kept remembering the weight of the gun in his hand, kept hearing Seraphina's voice saying they were broken beyond repair. Maybe she was right. Maybe they'd crossed too many lines to ever come back. But tomorrow, they'd find out. Tomorrow, they'd walk into Federal Plaza with their hands up and their secrets armed, and either the system would work or it would kill them. Either way, the running would be over. Either way, they'd finally know if redemption was possible or just another lie they'd told themselves to keep going. Dawn came cold and gray. Chicago waking up to another day of corruption and compromise and people trying to survive without becoming monsters. Damian stood on the safe house roof, watching the city breathe. Somewhere out there, Marcus was preparing, positioning assets, deciding whether to honor the law he'd sworn to uphold or execute the people who knew his secrets. Seraphina joined him on the roof. She didn't say anything, just stood beside him while the sun tried to break through pollution haze. Two people who'd destroyed each other and somehow ended up here, on the edge of either salvation or annihilation. "If this goes wrong," she said quietly, "if Marcus kills us both in that plaza, I want you to know something." "What?" "I forgive you for the press conference, for destroying my life, for all of it." She looked at him.
Took me 3 years and 37 bodies to get there. But I finally understand. You believed you were right, and sometimes belief is enough to destroy the people we love. Seraphina, I'm not done. She smiled, sad and tired. I forgive you, and I'm sorry for dragging you into this, for turning you into someone who kills, for making you choose between your old life and this nightmare.
I chose you. That's not something to apologize for. Isn't it? She turned back to the city. Maybe in another life we could have been happy. Could have had the marriage we planned instead of the war we got. Maybe. But not this life. This life, we're just two broken people trying to survive long enough to figure out what comes after broken. The sun broke through. Light spilled across Chicago's skyline, illuminating the city where they'd loved and destroyed and fought to survive. In 6 hours, they'd walk into that city with their hands up and their fate uncertain. But at least they'd walk together. At least this time, neither of them would be alone. Isabella appeared in the stairwell. It's time. They climbed down, geared up. Damian wore a wire that would broadcast everything to 3 different servers. Insurance, in case the meeting went sideways. Seraphina had a phone in her pocket programmed to release all their files with a single missed call. More insurance. Enough insurance to maybe keep them alive. Maybe. They drove downtown in silence. Federal Plaza appeared ahead, concrete and glass and the weight of government authority made physical. News vans were already there. Isabella had leaked the meeting to every major outlet. Cameras lined the plaza. Reporters jostled for position. Perfect. They parked 2 blocks out, walked the rest. Hands visible, no weapons. Just 3 people surrendering to a system that had already tried to kill them once. Marcus was waiting on the plaza steps. Behind him stood 20 federal agents in tactical gear. Behind them stood the full weight of the United States government. Seraphina walked forward first. Damian followed. Isabella brought up the rear. They stopped 10 feet from Marcus. His face was unreadable. You came, he said. You doubted it? Seraphina echoed Isabella's words from the airport. After everything, yeah, I doubted. Marcus gestured and the tactical team raised weapons. Seraphina Vale, Damian Cross, Isabella Moretti, you're all under arrest. On what charges? Damian asked. Loud enough for the cameras, loud enough for the world. Terrorism, murder, racketeering, conspiracy. Should I continue? Yes, continue. Tell everyone here about Operation Nightfall, about how the FBI spent 6 years using organized crime to eliminate organized crime, about Patterson and his kill teams and the off-books program that turned American citizens into weapons. Marcus's face went white. I don't know what We have files. Patterson's files. Every operation, every target, every illegal act committed under federal authority. Seraphina held up her phone. 1 missed call and it all goes public. Every news outlet, every prosecutor, every congressional oversight committee. That's blackmail. That's insurance. Isabella smiled. You want us quiet? You process us legally. Fair trials, public proceedings, everything by the book. And if we refuse? Then the world learns what the Bureau really does when nobody's watching. Damian's voice was steady. Your choice, Marcus. Clean arrest or complete transparency. The agents looked at each other. The cameras rolled. The city watched. Marcus stood on the edge of a decision that would define everything. Finally, after what felt like years, he lowered his weapon. Cuff them, he said quietly. Book them properly. Everything legal. The agents moved forward. Seraphina offered her hands. Damian did the same. Isabella last. The cuffs clicked into place one by one, cold metal against skin. The weight of consequences made physical. As they were led toward the federal building, Damian caught Seraphina's eye. She smiled. Small, exhausted, but real. They'd survived. For now. The question was what came next and whether survival was enough. The federal building swallowed them into concrete and fluorescent lights, into interrogation rooms and processing procedures and the grinding machinery of justice. They were separated immediately. Different rooms, different questioners, different approaches. Damian sat alone for 3 hours before Marcus finally entered. Hell of a play, Marcus said. He sat across from Damian, looking older than his years. Using our own crimes as leverage. Learned from the best. That's supposed to be a compliment? Statement of fact. Damian leaned back. What happens now? Now we negotiate. You plead guilty to reduce charges. We avoid trial and media circus. You serve 5 years, maybe 10, with good behavior. And Seraphina? 20 years minimum. She killed 37 people, Damian. That doesn't just disappear because she was manipulated. By you, by Patterson, by the Bureau, by her choices. Marcus's voice hardened. Nobody forced her to pull those triggers. Nobody made her become the Night Diamond. You did. You destroyed her life and then watched her fight to survive it. That makes you complicit in every death. Maybe, but complicit doesn't get prosecuted. Murder does. Marcus stood. Take the deal. Do your time. Walk away alive. That's better than you deserve. He left. The door locked. Damian sat in silence, thinking about 5 years in federal prison, 5 years of concrete and razor wire and slowly dying inside. Would he survive it? Would anything of who he was remain? Did it matter? The door opened again. This time Seraphina stood in the doorway, escorted by 2 guards. They'd given her 5 minutes, standard procedure before long-term separation. Hey, she said. Hey. They looked at each other across the interrogation room. So much to say. No time to say it. They're offering me 20, she said, if I testify against Isabella. Otherwise, it's life. You gonna take it? I don't know. 20 years is a long time. I'll be 52 when I get out. If I get out. She sat down. What about you? 5 years? Maybe 10. That's not bad. Feels like dying slowly. Better than dying fast. She reached across the table, took his hand. We survived, Damian. Against everything. Against the FBI. Against Moretti. Against our own stupidity. We actually survived. Is that enough? Has to be. It's all we've got. The guard shifted. Time was up. Seraphina stood slowly. Damian held onto her hand until the last possible second. Then she was gone. Walking away down a corridor that led to decades of concrete and regret. Damian sat alone in the interrogation room, listening to the building breathe around him. Federal Plaza, Chicago, America. The system grinding through another day of processing criminals and pretending justice meant something. Maybe it did. Maybe surviving was its own kind of justice. Maybe redemption was just learning to live with what you'd become. The door opened one final time. A guard motioned him forward. Time to process. Time to begin serving the sentence he'd earned through choices and consequences and loving someone enough to destroy them. Damian stood, walked forward, and hoped that somewhere on the other side of 5 years in hell, he'd find out if he was still human. Or just another monster pretending. 4 years disappeared into concrete and razor wire. Damian served his time at FCY Sandstone in Minnesota. Medium security, white-collar criminals mixed with drug offenders and low-level mob associates. He kept his head down, worked in the library, and learned to measure his life in days instead of dreams. The man who'd once commanded boardrooms and shook hands with senators became inmate 84762, existing in a world where survival meant staying invisible and time stretched into something geological. Seraphina went to FCY Danbury in Connecticut, women's facility. She got 22 years after refusing to testify against Isabella. The prosecutor called her uncooperative. Really, she just couldn't betray the woman who'd saved their lives, no matter how much destruction Isabella had caused. Prison swallowed her whole. No visitors, no letters, just silence that lasted longer than some marriages. Isabella took a deal nobody expected, full cooperation. Every family she'd ever worked with, every crime she'd witnessed, every body she knew about, all of it traded for 15 years and witness protection afterward. She testified at 17 different trials, brought down organizations that had operated for generations. The mob families called her a traitor. The FBI called her an asset. Really, she was just tired of being what everyone else needed her to be. Marcus Chen got promoted, made assistant director, got a corner office and a commendation and a carefully crafted narrative about dismantling Chicago's criminal infrastructure. Operation Nightfall was classified, buried so deep even congressional oversight committees couldn't touch it. Patterson and his team became footnotes in reports nobody read. Heroes who died serving their country. The truth stayed locked in servers that would self-destruct before releasing anything. The evidence Damian and Seraphina had used as leverage, it disappeared 6 months after their sentencing. Servers corrupted, backups deleted, every copy scrubbed from existence by people with budgets and resources and no conscience about rewriting history. The dead man's switch became a dead letter. Their insurance evaporated like morning fog. They should have expected it, but hope makes people stupid. Damian learned about the evidence destruction through a newspaper article. Some tech journalist had tried to investigate Operation Nightfall based on rumors and anonymous tips. Found nothing. Every lead went cold. Every source recanted. The article concluded that the whole thing was probably conspiracy theory, paranoid fantasy from people who couldn't accept that the FBI actually did its job legally. He read that article in the prison library during a Minnesota winter that felt like dying slowly from cold. Snow piled against the windows. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. And Damian understood finally, completely, that justice was just another story people told themselves to sleep better. The truth didn't matter. Only what people could prove mattered, and they couldn't prove anything anymore. He stopped hoping for early release after that. Year 2 was harder than Year 1. The novelty of survival wore off, leaving nothing but grinding repetition. Wake up, count, breakfast, work detail, lunch, yard time, dinner, count again. Lights out. Every day identical to the last. Every tomorrow a carbon copy of yesterday. Damian started to understand why some inmates just gave up, let themselves fade into institutional gray until nothing remained but a body going through motions. He almost became one of them. Then he got a letter. It came on a Tuesday in March, Year 3. Prison mailroom forwarded it after the standard inspection. Plain envelope. Return address in Connecticut. Seraphina's facility. His hands shook opening it. The letter was short. 3 paragraphs in handwriting he barely recognized. Smaller, more cramped than he remembered. Prison changed even the way people wrote. Damian, it started. No preamble, no small talk. I'm writing this because my lawyer said I should maintain some connection to the outside world. Something to anchor me for when I get out in 19 years. She doesn't understand that 19 years is longer than some civilizations last. But I'm writing anyway because the silence is worse than the words. I don't know if you're still the person I knew. Prison breaks people or rebuilds them into something unrecognizable. I've watched it happen to women around me. They arrive soft and leave stone. I feel it happening to myself. The edges wearing away, the parts that made me human getting filed down to nothing. If you're still you, if anything of Damian Cross survived these years, write back. Tell me something true. Tell me survival is more than just breathing and counting days. Tell me we didn't trade one hell for another. S. He read it 17 times, memorized every word. Then he sat down in his cell with paper and a stubby pencil and tried to remember how to be honest. Seraphina, he wrote, I'm not the person you knew. That man died somewhere between the explosion and the arrest. What's left is harder, quieter. I spent 2 years trying to figure out if that's evolution or erasure. Still don't have an answer. Prison teaches you that survival and living are different things. I survive every day. Wake up, go through the motions, make it to lights out. But I haven't lived, really lived, since the last time I saw you in that interrogation room. You asked for something true. Here's true. I think about you every day. Wonder if you're surviving or living. Wonder if the difference even matters anymore. Wonder if when we get out, if we get out, there'll be anything left worth saving in either of us. I don't know, but I'd like to find out. D. They wrote every week after that. Not long letters, not philosophical dissertations, just small truths passed between people trying to remember how to be human. Seraphina wrote about the library where she worked, about teaching other inmates to read, about the way sunrise looked through prison windows when you'd forgotten what dawn felt like. Damian wrote about the garden detail he'd joined, about learning to grow things when everything around him was designed for containment, about how strange it was to nurture tomatoes while his own life withered. The letters weren't love. Not really. They were lifelines thrown across hundreds of miles and years of damage. Proof that someone else remembered who they'd been before they became inmates in numbers and cautionary tales. Year 4, Marcus came to visit. He looked older, gray threading through his hair, lines around his eyes that came from stress or guilt or both. He sat across from Damian in the visitor's room, hands folded on the table between them, and for 5 full minutes neither of them spoke. "Why are you here?" Damian asked finally. "Because I owed you a conversation. Real one. Not interrogation, not negotiation, just 2 people talking. We're not people anymore. You're assistant director. I'm inmate 84762. That's not a conversation. That's a power imbalance." Marcus flinched slightly. "Fair. But I'm here anyway because I need to tell you something. Something I couldn't say during the trial. Which is that I'm sorry for all of it. For lying to you. For using you. For letting Seraphina get turned into a weapon while I built my career on her kills." He stopped, swallowed. For not being brave enough to stop it when I realized how wrong it was. Damian stared at him, tried to find anger, found only exhaustion. "You think sorry changes anything?" "No, but maybe it starts something. Maybe it's the first brick in rebuilding what got destroyed. You can't rebuild this, Marcus. You can't undo 4 years of my life or 22 years of Seraphina's. You can't bring back the people she killed or the man I used to be." Damian leaned forward. "You want absolution? Talk to someone who has the authority to give it. I'm just trying to survive until my release date." "What about after you get out?" "What about it? What?" "You'll need work, connections, help reintegrating." Marcus pulled out a business card, slid it across the table. "When you're released, call this number. I've got contacts who can provide job placement, housing assistance, therapy referrals." Damian looked at the card like it was a snake. "Why would you help me?" "Because watching you waste away in here while I get promoted feels like dying slowly from guilt." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "Because you were my friend. That was real, Damian. Everything else was lies and manipulation, but our friendship was real, and I destroyed it. And I've spent 4 years trying to figure out how to live with that. By offering me a job referral? By offering something, anything, even if it's inadequate and insulting and 4 years too late." Marcus stood. "You don't have to call. You don't have to accept anything from me. But the offer stands. When you're ready, if you're ever ready." He left. The card stayed on the table. Damian stared at it until a guard told him visiting hours were over. Then he took the card back to his cell and tucked it between the pages of Seraphina's latest letter. Insurance. Or weakness. Hard to tell the difference anymore. Year 5 arrived with paperwork and possibility. Damian's release date was set, 6 months away. His lawyer, court-appointed, overworked, but competent, started preparing reintegration plans. Halfway house in Chicago, probation terms, the long list of restrictions that came with being a felon trying to rebuild a life. He wrote to Seraphina about it, tried to make it sound hopeful. Mostly, it just sounded tired. Her response came 2 weeks later. "Damian, I'm happy for you. Really. You survived and now you get to live. Hold on to that. Don't let the system or the guilt or the memory of who you were destroy what comes next. I've got 17 years left. 17 years of watching women arrive and leave while I stay. 17 years of wondering if anything of me will survive long enough to see the outside again. But knowing you'll be out there, living, building, becoming something beyond what we were forced to become, that helps. That makes the years feel less like dying and more like waiting. Don't visit me. Don't put your life on hold. Just live. For both of us. Live enough for 2 people. S." He read that letter until the paper wore thin. Then he tucked it away with the others, 47 letters spanning 4 years, documenting 2 people trying to remember how to be human through words and honesty and shared survival. The day of his release came cold and gray. November in Minnesota, the kind of weather that made everything feel like an ending. Damian walked out of FCY Sandstone with a plastic bag containing his belongings, worn clothes, a folder of legal documents, and a bundle of letters tied with string. A car was waiting. Marcus, looking uncomfortable behind the wheel. "You didn't have to come," Damian said. "I know. Thought you might want to ride anyway." They drove in silence for 20 miles. Flat Minnesota landscape scrolling past. Eventually Marcus spoke. "I meant what I said, about the job placement, about helping. I know. Will you call the number?" "I don't know." Damian watched fields blur into towns. Part of me wants to disappear, change my name, start over somewhere nobody knows what I did or who I was. And the other part? Wants to go back to Chicago, face what I destroyed, see if anything can be salvaged from the wreckage. What about Seraphina? The name hung between them like a wound. Damian didn't answer for a long time. Then, she told me not to wait, told me to live my own life. But I don't know how to do that when she's still locked up because of choices we made together. You could visit her. She doesn't want visitors. Maybe she just doesn't want to admit she needs them. Marcus took an exit toward the airport. You're flying to Chicago? Yeah, halfway house in Rogers Park, same neighborhood where Seraphina had one of her safe houses. Damian smiled bitterly. Poetic, right? Back where it all burned down. Will you be okay? Define okay. He looked at Marcus. I survived 5 years in federal prison. I'll survive whatever comes next. The question is whether survival is enough anymore. Marcus dropped him at Minneapolis-St. Paul International. They shook hands, awkward, formal, the ghost of friendship haunting every gesture. Call if you need anything, Marcus said. Sure. I mean it. I know. Doesn't mean I'll call. Marcus nodded. Understood. Guilt and friendship couldn't coexist comfortably. They'd learned that lesson in blood and consequences. Now they were just two men trying to figure out how to live with what they'd become. Damian flew to Chicago alone. The city looked different from the air, smaller somehow, more fragile. Or maybe he was just seeing it with eyes that had learned hard truths about power and justice, and the lies people told themselves about both. The halfway house was exactly what he expected. Institutional furniture, thin walls, residents who looked like they'd given up or were trying desperately not to. His room was 8 by 10 feet. Bed, desk, window overlooking an alley. The same square footage as his cell, just with different bars. He unpacked his bag. Laid out the letters on the desk. 47 reminders that someone else was still fighting, still surviving, still hoping the years meant something beyond punishment and time served. His probation officer was a woman named Rodriguez, late 40s, seen everything, impressed by nothing. She laid out the terms clearly: weekly check-ins, drug tests, employment within 30 days, no contact with known criminals, no leaving Illinois without permission. One violation, and he went back inside. Understand? She asked. Yes. Good. Most people violate within 6 months. Prove me wrong. He tried. Got a job at a construction company that hired ex-cons. Manual labor. 10 hours a day rebuilding the same city he'd once helped shape with architectural plans and development deals. The work was hard, honest. It hurt in ways that felt clean compared to everything that came before. Nights were worse. Alone in his room, Chicago's sounds filtering through thin walls, he'd lie awake remembering. The explosion, the warehouse fights, Seraphina's face when she'd held a knife to Isabella's throat, the weight of the gun in his hand the first time he'd killed someone. He started going to the library, the same one where Seraphina used to work before everything burned down. It had been rebuilt after a fire 2 years ago. New books, new shelves, same bones. He'd sit in the corner reading about urban planning and sustainable architecture, trying to remember the man who'd once believed buildings could change lives. 6 months passed, then a year. Damian established routines: work, library, halfway house, probation meetings. Slowly the restrictions eased. He moved into his own apartment. Nothing fancy. But his. A space that belonged to him instead of the system. He still wrote to Seraphina every week. She wrote back less frequently now. Her letters grew shorter, more distant, like she was pulling away intentionally, creating space between his freedom and her confinement. He understood, but it hurt anyway. Year 2 of freedom, Isabella was released. She'd served 7 years of her 15-year sentence. Early release for extraordinary cooperation and good behavior. Witness protection whisked her away to somewhere nobody would ever find her. New identity, new life. The woman who'd orchestrated so much destruction got to disappear and start over. Damian learned about it from a newspaper article buried on page 17. Mob informant released from federal custody. 3 paragraphs. No details. Just confirmation that Isabella Moretti had ceased to exist officially. He wondered if she thought about them. About Seraphina locked up for 17 more years. About the war they'd survived and the prices they'd paid. Or if she'd simply moved on, grateful for the chance to become someone else. That night he wrote to Seraphina about it, tried to make it sound neutral. Mostly it just came out bitter. Her response took 3 weeks. I'm glad Isabella got out. Really. She deserves a chance to be something other than what we all became. Don't resent her freedom. It doesn't diminish yours or make my sentence heavier. We all made choices. We all paid prices. Some currencies just cost more than others. 16 years left. I've stopped counting days and started counting small victories. Today I helped a woman read her daughter's letter without asking for help. That's a victory. Yesterday I watched sunrise through my window and remembered what beauty felt like. That's a victory too. You asked in your last letter if I ever regret coming back to warn you. If I wish I'd just let you die at that party surrounded by lies and champagne. The answer is no. I'd do it again, even knowing everything that followed, because some things matter more than survival. Some people are worth saving even when saving them destroys you. You were worth it. You still are. S. Damian read that letter until he memorized every word. Then he made a decision that had been building for 2 years. He was going to visit her. Connecticut wasn't that far. A day's drive or a short flight. His probation terms allowed travel within the Northeast with advance notice. Rodriguez approved the request with a raised eyebrow and a warning, "Don't do anything stupid." "Define stupid," Damian said. "Anything that brings you back to my office in handcuffs." "Then I'll do my best to stay free." He drove. Took 3 days, stopping at rest areas and cheap motels, working up the courage to face Seraphina after 7 years apart. 7 years of letters and silence and becoming different people in different prisons. FCI Danbury sat in rolling Connecticut hills like a wound in pretty landscape. Damian checked in at the visitor's center, filled out forms, went through metal detectors and pat-downs and all the security theater designed to remind you this was punishment, not rehabilitation. They made him wait 45 minutes in a room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation. Other visitors sat clutching photos and hope, trying to recognize family members they hadn't seen in years. Damian clutched nothing, just sat there wondering if Seraphina would even agree to see him. Then she walked through the door. 7 years had changed her in ways letters couldn't convey. Thinner, harder, gray threading through her dark hair, lines around her eyes and mouth that came from years of controlled expression and swallowed emotion. But her eyes were the same, fierce and tired, and still burning with something that refused to die. She sat across from him. The table between them was scarred and permanent. Guards watched from corners. Other inmates and visitors conducted whispered conversations all around them. They stared at each other for 30 seconds that felt like drowning. "You came," she said finally. "You told me not to." "I know what I said. Doesn't mean I didn't want you to ignore it." "So which is it? You glad I'm here or angry?" "Both, neither. I don't know." She laughed quietly. 7 years of letters, and I thought I'd know what to say. Turns out words are easier when they're written. "I know what you mean." Silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just heavy with everything unsaid, and everything that couldn't be said with guards listening and time ticking down. "You look good," Seraphina said. "Healthy, like freedom agrees with you." "Freedom's relative. I'm out. You're in. That's not agreement, that's inequality." "Don't." Her voice sharpened. "Don't make my sentence your burden. You've paid enough. Serve your time. Move forward." "How?" The word came out harder than he intended. "How do I move forward when you're still locked up? When I'm outside rebuilding a life and you've got 16 years left of this?" "The same way I do, one day at a time, one small victory at a time." She leaned forward slightly. "You think I'm suffering every second?" "I'm not. I found things here, purpose, meaning, teaching women to read, helping them write letters, being something other than the night diamond." She smiled. "Prison doesn't have to be just punishment. Sometimes it's time. Time to become someone different." "And who are you becoming?" "I don't know yet. Ask me in 16 years. Damian wanted to argue, wanted to rage about injustice and the years stolen, and the fact that she was in here because he'd destroyed her life first. But looking at her face, calm, resolved, more at peace than he'd seen her in years, he understood. She'd made her own separate peace, found her own way to survive that didn't involve him or his guilt or his need to fix what he'd broken. I wrote you 47 letters, he said quietly. I kept every one. That's why I came, to see if the person in those letters was real or just words on paper. And? You're real. More real than I expected. He smiled. That makes this harder. What? Accepting that you don't need me to save you, that you're saving yourself. She reached across the table, took his hand. The guard by the door shifted but didn't intervene. Contact was allowed, barely.
I don't need saving, she said, but I need knowing. Knowing you're out there living. Knowing someone remembers who I was before all this. Knowing that when I get out, if I get out, there might be someone who understands what I became and why. I'll be here. Don't promise that. 16 years is longer than most marriages last. You'll meet someone, build a life, move on. That's what you're supposed to do. And if I don't want to,
Then you're a fool. But she smiled when she said it. A stubborn, loyal fool who apparently can't take good advice. Learned from you. They sat there holding hands across a scarred table while minutes ticked away. Other visits ended around them. Families hugged goodbye. Children cried. The grinding machinery of the prison system reminded everyone that time was currency and visits cost more than money. I should go, Damian said. Didn't move. You should. Will you write back if I keep sending letters? Do I have a choice? You're relentless. That's not an answer. Yes, I'll write back. Even when I'm tired, even when the words don't come easy. She squeezed his hand. But Damian, don't put your life on hold waiting for mine to restart. Promise me that. I can't. Then lie. Tell me you promise even if you don't mean it. Let me believe you're moving forward. I promise, he lied. She saw through it. Of course she did. 7 years of letters had taught her to read him across distance and silence. But she nodded anyway. Accepted the lie because truth would have hurt worse. The guard announced visiting hours were over. Seraphina stood. Damian followed. They looked at each other one more time. Two people who'd destroyed each other and somehow survived long enough to become something else. Something harder and stranger and maybe more honest than what they'd been before. Thank you, she said, for coming, for writing, for being stubborn enough to ignore good advice. Anytime. Don't make it too often. These visits hurt more than the letters. Because they're real? Because they remind me what I'm missing. She turned toward the door where guards waited to escort her back to her cell block. Goodbye, Damian. Not goodbye. See you later. 16 years later? However long it takes. She walked away. Disappeared through a steel door that locked behind her with a sound like finality. Damian stood in the empty visitor's room, feeling hollowed out and somehow more whole than he'd been in years. He'd seen her, touched her, confirmed she was more than just words on paper, and she'd confirmed something else. She'd survived this, with or without him. She'd become whoever prison let her become and walk out the other side transformed into something neither of them could predict. The question was whether he'd do the same. Damian drove back to Chicago thinking about time and transformation and the way people became strangers to themselves through survival. He'd been Damian Cross once, billionaire, developer, the man who destroyed his wife's life through arrogance and certainty. That man was dead. Now he was Martin Cross, ex-con, construction worker, someone trying to figure out if redemption meant anything beyond surviving long enough to die with less guilt. Years passed like water, slow, inexorable, impossible to hold. Damian wrote to Seraphina every week. Sometimes she wrote back, sometimes she didn't. The letters became a meditation, a practice of showing up even when response wasn't guaranteed, proof that some things mattered beyond immediate reward. He got promoted at the construction company, made foreman, then project manager. Turned out the skills that had built a real estate empire translated to rebuilding Chicago's infrastructure one project at a time. The money was worse. The hours were longer, but the work felt clean, honest, like maybe he was actually building instead of just extracting value. He dated occasionally, never seriously. How could he? Every woman he met eventually asked about his past, about why he lived like a monk, about the letters he wrote every Sunday without fail. And explaining meant reliving, meant admitting he'd destroyed someone he loved and couldn't let go even after 7 years apart. Most women didn't sign up for that level of baggage.
Year 10 of Seraphina's sentence, something changed. The letter came different, thicker, more pages. Her handwriting looked steadier. The words came easier. Damian, something happened. Something I need to tell you in person if you're willing to drive out here again. It's not bad. Or maybe it is. I can't tell anymore. But it's important and I don't want to write it. I want to see your face when I say it. Can you come? Next month? I know it's asking a lot, but please. Yes. He requested time off work. Made the drive again, 7 years since his last visit. The route was familiar now. Every rest stop, every stretch of highway, every mile bringing him closer to a woman who'd become more memory than reality. FCI Danbury looked the same. Same fence, same guards, same waiting room smelling like institutional despair. But when Seraphina walked through the door, she looked different, lighter somehow. Like some weight had finally lifted. She sat down, smiled. Not the tired smile he remembered, something genuine. Thank you for coming, she said. What happened? Lawyers happened, new lawyers, pro bono work from Northwestern's legal clinic. She pulled out a folded document. They found procedural errors in my trial. The judge who sentenced me? Turns out he had financial connections to one of the families I helped dismantle. Should have recused himself. Didn't. Damian's heart started hammering. What does that mean? It means I filed for appeal, and the appeal got accepted, and there's a hearing in 6 months. She looked at him with something that might have been hope. I might get out, Damian. Not immediately, not definitely, but maybe. Actually, maybe instead of theoretical, maybe. How much time would you serve? If the appeal works, time served plus 3 years, total 13 instead of 22. Her hands trembled slightly. 9 years off my sentence, 9 years of my life back. He couldn't find words. That's incredible. It's terrifying. I've built a life here. I know how to survive here. Outside? She laughed nervously. Outside, I'm a convicted felon with a decade in prison and skills that don't translate to normal employment. I'll be starting over with nothing. You'll have me. The words hung there, simple, insufficient, everything. Seraphina looked at him for a long moment. You've been waiting, even though I told you not to, even though 10 years is longer than some people live. I'm stubborn. You're insane. That too. She reached across the table, took both his hands. If I get out, when I get out, I don't know who I'll be. Prison changes people. I'm not the woman you married. I'm not even the woman who walked into your engagement party. I'm not the man who destroyed your life at a press conference. We're both different people now. Exactly. So what if those people don't fit together? What if we get out here and realize we were just holding on to something that stopped existing years ago? Then we figure that out together. Damian squeezed her hands. But Seraphina, I didn't wait 10 years because I'm holding on to who we were. I waited because I want to find out who we're becoming, and I'd rather find out with you than alone. She was crying, silent tears cutting tracks down her face. Not sad tears, something else. Relief maybe. Or terror. Or the complicated mixture of both that came from hoping after years of just surviving. Okay, she whispered. Okay. If the appeal works, if I get out, we try. We actually try to build something from this wreckage. Deal. They sat there holding hands across the table while her tears fell and his heart hammered and the future shifted from theoretical to possible. 6 months later, Seraphina walked out of FCY Danbury. The appeal had worked. Time served plus 3 years equaled 13 total. Credits for good behavior and educational programs cut another 18 months. She emerged on a cold March morning with the same plastic bag of belongings Damian had carried out of Sandstone 11 years earlier. He was waiting. Leaning against his car, not the construction truck he drove for work, but a used sedan he'd bought specifically for this moment, something reliable, something that could drive them both toward whatever came next. She saw him and stopped walking. They stared at each other across 40 feet of parking lot. 11 years of letters and 2 visits and countless hours wondering if this moment would ever arrive. Then she was moving, running, and he was running, and they collided in the middle of the parking lot like 2 people who'd forgotten how to be careful with each other. The hug lasted forever, lasted seconds,
lasted exactly as long as it needed to communicate everything words couldn't. They were both crying, both laughing, both terrified and relieved and alive in ways prison had made impossible. "You actually waited," she said into his shoulder. "Told you I would." 11 years. You waited 11 years? Would have waited longer if I had to. She pulled back, looked at his face. Really looked, cataloging the changes time had carved, gray in his beard, lines around his eyes, the way he held himself differently, less arrogant, more grounded. "You look old," she said. "You look beautiful." "I look like I spent 13 years in prison." "Then prison looks good on you." She laughed, actual laughter. The sound felt like oxygen after drowning. They stood there in the parking lot, grinning at each other like fools, until a guard yelled that they needed to clear the area. Damian opened the passenger door. Seraphina climbed in. He started the engine and they pulled away from FCY Danbury, from 13 years of confinement, from everything that had broken them into pieces small enough to rebuild. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Chicago. Unless you want somewhere else." "Chicago's fine. Chicago's where it started. Makes sense it's where we try to finish it." They drove in comfortable silence for 20 miles. Then Seraphina spoke again. "I need to tell you something, before we get too far down this road, before you make plans that include me permanently." "What? I'm not the same person. You know that intellectually, but you need to understand it viscerally." She turned to face him. "I've spent 13 years learning to be alone, to not need anyone, to survive on my own terms. That doesn't just switch off because I'm out." "I know. Do you?" "Because I can see it in how you look at me. Like I'm the woman you married. Like we can just pick up where we left off before everything burned down." She shook her head. "That woman is gone, Damian. She died in witness protection, or maybe in that first warehouse we burned. What's left is someone harder, someone who doesn't trust easy, someone who might not be capable of the kind of love we had before. Then we build a different kind. What if I can't? What if 13 years alone broke something that can't be fixed? Then we live with broken. I've been living with broken for 16 years. It's not ideal, but it beats the alternative." She studied his face, searching for something. "You really mean that?" "Every word." "You're still insane." "Absolutely, but insanity's gotten us this far. Might as well see where else it leads." She smiled, small, cautious, but real. "Okay, we try. But Damian, no promises, no expectations. We take it slow and see if we can build something that actually works instead of just surviving on borrowed time." "Deal." They drove toward Chicago as the sun set behind them, toward the city where they'd loved and destroyed and fought to survive, toward whatever future two broken people could build from the ruins of who they'd been. Chicago welcomed them with indifference. The city didn't care about their story, didn't care that they'd spent 16 years paying for crimes and mistakes and the simple act of loving each other badly. It just kept breathing, traffic and construction and life happening to people who hadn't destroyed their own worlds and rebuilt them from ash. Damian had found an apartment for Seraphina in Rogers Park. Small studio, nothing fancy, but clean and safe and hers. He'd furnished it minimally, bed, table, chairs. Didn't want to assume what she'd need or want. Better to let her decide what to keep and what to discard. She stood in the doorway looking at the space, her first private space in 13 years, her first choice about anything that wasn't regulated or monitored or controlled. "It's perfect," she said quietly. "It's barely furnished." "Exactly. It's potential. It's waiting for me to decide who I am now." She walked in slowly, touched the walls, the window, the bed. "Thank you." "For what?" "For not assuming, for giving me space to figure this out. I've got my own place 3 blocks away. If you need anything, if you want company, doors open. And if I don't, if I need weeks or months to just be alone and remember how to exist outside a cell, then I'll wait. I'm good at that now." She turned to face him. They stood in her empty apartment while Chicago hummed outside and the future stretched uncertain and terrifying ahead of them. "I need to say something," Seraphina said. "Something I've been holding for 13 years." "Okay. I forgive you completely. Finally. For the press conference. For destroying my life, for all of it." She stepped closer.
Took me more than a decade, but I understand now. You believed you were right, and belief is a powerful thing. It makes us capable of anything, creation or destruction. Seraphina, so I'm not done. I forgive you. And I need you to forgive yourself. Because carrying that guilt for 16 years is just another prison, and we've both served enough time. Damian felt something crack open in his chest. 13 years of guilt and penance and trying to earn redemption through suffering. And she was offering to just release it, to let it go. I don't know if I can, he admitted. Try. For both of us. Try to become someone who did terrible things and learn from them instead of someone who's just perpetually atoning. She took his hands. We were weapons once, tools used by people who saw us as expendable. But we're not weapons anymore. We're just people trying to figure out how to live without destroying each other. And if we fail, then we fail honestly, with eyes open, with full understanding of what we're trying to build. She smiled. But Damian, I don't think we'll fail. I think we've been testing each other for 16 years, learning how to survive alone so we could choose to be together. And now we finally get to see if that choice means anything. He kissed her then, gentle, tentative. First kiss in 16 years. It tasted like possibility and fear and something that might eventually become hope. When they pulled apart, Seraphina was crying again. I thought I'd forgotten how to do that, she said. Kiss? Feel something besides survival and anger. She wiped her eyes. It's terrifying. Welcome to freedom. Is this what it's always like? This mix of terror and possibility? Pretty much, but it beats the alternative. They stood in her apartment as evening fell over Chicago. Two people who'd spent 16 years becoming strangers to themselves. Two people who'd survived hell through words and letters and stubborn refusal to give up. Two people trying to figure out if love could exist after everything love had already cost them. The answer wouldn't come quick, wouldn't come easy, would probably take years of learning and failing and trying again. But they had time now. Actual time. Not measured in days until release or years until eligibility. Just open-ended time stretching toward a future they got to build themselves. That night, Damian went back to his apartment, left Seraphina alone in her new space to process and breathe and remember how to exist without bars and guards and schedules. He lay in bed looking at his ceiling, thinking about the press conference 16 years ago. About standing in front of cameras and destroying the woman he loved because he'd been so certain he was right. That man felt like a stranger now, someone else entirely, someone capable of cruelty dressed up as justice. But maybe that was growth. Maybe becoming someone different meant accepting you'd been someone terrible first. His phone buzzed. Text message from Seraphina. Thank you for the apartment. Thank you for waiting. Thank you for being stubborn enough to ignore good advice for 11 years. Get some sleep. Tomorrow, we figure out what comes next. He texted back, looking forward to it. And for the first time in 16 years, that was true. He was actually looking forward to tomorrow, instead of just dreading it. Looking forward to building instead of atoning. Looking forward to finding out who they could become now that survival wasn't the only goal. Morning came with possibilities. Seraphina started slowly. Applied for jobs that would hire felons. Got rejected by most. Finally landed work at a nonprofit that helped former inmates reintegrate. Turns out 13 years teaching women to read in prison translated to helping people navigate systems designed to keep them trapped. Damian kept working construction, kept managing projects, kept building Chicago's infrastructure while trying to rebuild his own life. They saw each other twice a week at first. Coffee, walks, conversations that covered everything and nothing. Learning how to be people together instead of just survivors sharing trauma. 3 months in, Seraphina invited him to dinner at her apartment. She'd furnished it slowly, books from thrift stores, art from street vendors, furniture scavenged from curbs and refinished with her own hands. It looked lived in now, looked like someone who was building a life instead of just occupying space. You're nesting, Damian said. I'm existing. There's a difference. Not sure there is. They ate spaghetti she'd cooked from scratch. First meal she'd made in her own kitchen in 16 years. It was slightly burned and undersalted and perfect. They talked about work in Chicago and the small victories that made survival feel like living. After dinner, they sat on her couch that wasn't quite comfortable and watched the city lights through her window. I need to tell you something, Seraphina said. You keep saying that. Eventually I'm going to expect bad news. Not bad. Just honest. She turned to face him. I'm happy. Actually happy. Not just surviving, not just getting through days, actually content with this life we're building. That's good, right? It's terrifying because I keep waiting for it to fall apart. Keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, or the FBI to show up, or Isabella to emerge from witness protection with new plans for destruction. She laughed nervously. I don't know how to trust that good things can just be good. So we learn together. We practice trusting that happiness isn't a trap. You make it sound easy. It's not. But I've spent 16 years believing I didn't deserve happiness. Might as well spend the next 16 learning how to accept it. She kissed him then. Different from the first kiss. More certain. More present. Less about possibility and more about choice. When they pulled apart, they were both breathless. Stay, she said. Tonight? However long you want. However long this works. She held his gaze. I'm ready. Finally ready to actually try this instead of just talking about trying. You sure? No, but I'm sure enough, and sometimes that's all you get. He stayed. Not just that night, but most nights after. They built routines, coffee in the morning, work during the day, dinners they cooked together, evenings spent reading or talking or just existing in the same space. Simple things. Boring things. The kind of life people took for granted when they hadn't spent decades earning the right to be bored together. Year 2 of freedom, Marcus showed up unannounced. Damian was working a site in the Loop when a familiar car pulled up. Marcus emerged looking older, grayer, carrying the weight of whatever promotion he'd gotten for dismantling Chicago's mob families while using those families as weapons. Need to talk, Marcus said. About? Isabella. They walked to a coffee shop. Sat in a corner booth where construction dust and federal authority didn't quite mesh. Marcus pulled out a folder, thin, classified, the kind of document that shouldn't exist outside secure facilities. Isabella Moretti is dead, he said quietly. Damian felt the words hit. When? 3 days ago, car accident in Prague. Witnesses say she ran a red light. Surveillance shows no other vehicles. Just her losing control and hitting a bridge support at 60 miles an hour. You don't believe it was an accident. Do you? Marcus slid a photo across the table. Isabella's car, crumpled against concrete. She was too careful, too paranoid, spent 7 years looking over her shoulder, and suddenly she makes a fatal mistake in light traffic? Who killed her? Can't prove anyone did. But he pulled out another document. Isabella had been making inquiries about Operation Nightfall, about Patterson and his team, about whether the program was really shut down or just moved underground. And people who ask those questions tend to die in accidents. Marcus put the documents away. I can't prove the Bureau ordered it, can't even prove it wasn't random chance. But Isabella was a loose end, and loose ends have a way of getting tied up permanently. Damian processed this. Another death. Another person from their war, finally consumed by it. Why are you telling me? Because you and Seraphina are loose ends too, and because I want you to be careful. Watch your backs. Don't ask questions about things that are officially over. That's a warning. That's me trying to keep my friends alive. Marcus stood. I know you don't think of me as a friend anymore, but I remember when we were. And I'd like you both to survive long enough to build the lives you're trying to build. He left. Damian sat in the coffee shop staring at cold coffee and thinking about Isabella, about the woman who'd orchestrated their destruction and then saved their lives, about whether anyone really escaped the things they'd done or if the past just waited patiently to collect debts. He told Seraphina that night, watched her process the news with the flat affect of someone who'd learned to protect herself from feeling too much. She deserved better, Seraphina said finally. Did she? Maybe not. But she deserved the chance to find out who she could become after everything. Same chance we got. She stood, walked to the window. How many people from our war are left? You, me, Marcus. Everyone else is dead or disappeared. Does that make us survivors or just lucky? Both. Neither. I don't know anymore. She turned back. But Damian, I don't want to spend the rest of our lives looking over shoulders, waiting for federal agents or mob revenge or cosmic justice to catch up. I want to actually live. Then that's what we do. How? When people like Isabella don't get to? By choosing to every single day, by refusing to let the past define everything we become. He crossed to her, took her hands. Isabella's story ended. Ours doesn't have to. We get to keep writing it. She leaned into him. They stood by the window watching Chicago breathe while somewhere across the ocean, Isabella's body was being processed and documented and officially filed as an accident. Another casualty of a war nobody admitted was still being fought. Years continued their inexorable march. Damian and Seraphina built their lives piece by careful piece. She got promoted at the nonprofit, started running programs instead of just facilitating them. He started his own construction company, small, ethical, focused on affordable housing instead of luxury development. They got married again. Small ceremony, justice of the peace. No guests except Marcus, who showed up looking uncomfortable and grateful to be included. They bought a house in Logan Square. Nothing fancy, but theirs, with a garden where Seraphina grew tomatoes and Damian built a deck on weekends. The kind of domestic life that would have bored them 20 years ago felt revolutionary now. Proof they'd survived not just the war, but the peace after. Some nights Damian still woke up gasping, remembering gunfire, or the weight of killing someone, or the look on Seraphina's face when she'd held a knife to Isabella's throat. Those nights, Seraphina would hold him until his breathing steadied, and he'd do the same for her when her nightmares came. They'd never be fully healed. That much was clear. But broken pieces could still build something functional, something that worked even if it wasn't perfect. 5 years after Seraphina's release, they hosted their first dinner party. Just a few people from their nonprofit work, people who knew their histories and didn't care, people who understood that ex-cons could become decent humans given the time and support. After everyone left, Damian and Seraphina cleaned up together in comfortable silence, washing dishes, putting away food, the mundane rituals of a life well lived. "You know what I realized tonight?" Seraphina said. "What?" I laughed. Actually laughed at someone's joke without it feeling performative or forced. She set down a dish. "That sounds stupid, but I haven't genuinely laughed in years, maybe decades. And tonight I did it without thinking about it. That's not stupid, that's progress." Is it? Or is it just forgetting? Letting ourselves become comfortable when we should remember what we did? Why can't it be both? Damian dried the dish she'd washed. We remember, and we move forward. We carry the weight, and we build despite it. You make it sound possible. Because it is. Look around. We own a house. We have jobs we care about. We're hosting dinner parties and growing tomatoes. This is the impossible made real. She was quiet for a moment, then, "I love you." Still. Again. Whatever tense fits what we've become. I love you too. All tenses. All versions. Every iteration of us that survived long enough to be standing in this kitchen. They finished cleaning, turned off the lights, went to bed in a house they owned and a life they'd built from ruins. Outside, Chicago slept. Inside, two people who'd destroyed each other and survived the destruction finally allowed themselves to believe the war was actually over. 10 years after Seraphina's release, Marcus called. "Turn on the news," he said without preamble. "Channel 7, now." Damian found the remote, clicked to Channel 7. Breaking news banner. Federal investigation. Massive corruption scandal involving Chicago FBI office and illegal surveillance programs. Operation Nightfall was finally exposed. Not by Damian and Seraphina's evidence, that had been destroyed years ago, but by an entirely different whistleblower. A junior agent who'd found buried files and couldn't live with the knowledge. Who'd gone to journalists and congressional oversight and internal affairs simultaneously. The story broke wide open. Patterson and his team. The 6-year program using organized crime to eliminate organized crime. The black sites and kill teams and systematic violation of every constitutional protection that supposedly made America different. Heads rolled, senators launched investigations. The director resigned. Marcus got dragged into testimony, though he managed to avoid direct indictment. Through it all, Damian and Seraphina were never named.
They'd been erased from the narrative completely. Someone with power had decided their involvement was better left classified. Better to let them disappear into normal lives than dredge up complicated questions about vigilante justice and federal manipulation. We're free, Seraphina said, watching the news coverage. Actually free. Nobody's looking for us. Nobody's connecting us to any of this. How do you feel?
Hollow. Like we paid this enormous price and now nobody even knows we were part of it. All those letters, all those years, all that survival, it just vanished into classified files and redacted testimony. Maybe that's a gift. We get to be anonymous, get to build our lives without that shadow hanging over us. Or maybe it's erasure. Maybe someone decided our story wasn't worth telling. Damian sat beside her on the couch. They watched the news coverage in silence for a while. Then he spoke. Our story is worth telling, but maybe not by them. Maybe it's worth telling to each other, remembering what we survived, honoring who we became through surviving it. And the people we killed, the lives we destroyed, we carry those too. We remember them. We let them matter even if nobody else does. She leaned against him. They sat there watching the federal government tear itself apart over crimes they'd survived firsthand. Watched justice happen slowly, imperfectly, years too late to save anyone who'd needed saving. But it was happening. That counted for something. Marcus got cleared eventually. The investigation found he'd operated within orders, even if those orders were illegal. He kept his position, kept his career, kept rising through ranks while the system protected itself from full accountability. He called less after that. The guilt was too heavy, the reminder of what he'd helped create too painful. Damian understood. Some friendships couldn't survive that much damage. Some debts couldn't be repaid through contact and conversation. Life continued. Damian turned 50, then 55. Gray turned to white. His hands developed arthritis from years of construction work. Seraphina's face lined with age and laughter and the weight of carrying memories she couldn't share. They grew old together, slowly, in the house they'd bought and the life they'd built. They never had children, decided that carrying their own trauma was enough without passing it forward. But they mentored young people through the nonprofit, became the kind of elders who'd survived hell and came back with wisdom instead of just scars. On their 20th anniversary of Seraphina's release, 26 years after the explosion at Blackthorn Tower, they drove to Navy Pier. Walked to the carousel building where they'd once surrendered to federal agents with evidence as leverage. The carousel was running now. Children screamed with joy. Parents took photos. Life happening without any awareness that history had been made in this spot by people nobody remembered. You think it mattered? Seraphina asked. Everything we did. Everything we survived. To whom? To anyone, to the world, to the people who came after. Damian thought about it. I don't know. The corruption got exposed eventually. The mob families we helped dismantle stayed dismantled. Chicago's different than it was 26 years ago. He squeezed her hand. But mostly I think it mattered to us. We survived. We built something real from destruction. That has to count. Even if nobody knows. Especially because nobody knows. We didn't survive for recognition. We survived because giving up felt like dying. They stood watching the carousel spin. Painted horses rising and falling, music playing, children laughing. The world continuing regardless of the wars fought in shadows by people whose names would never make history books. I'm glad we made it, Seraphina said quietly. I'm glad we're standing here 26 years later still choosing each other. Me too. Think we've got another 26 in us? Probably not, but I'll take whatever we get. She smiled, kissed him. They walked back to their car hand in hand, two people who'd been weapons and victims and survivors, and finally, just people living ordinary lives made extraordinary by the simple fact of surviving to live them. Chicago swallowed them back into its rhythms. Traffic and noise and millions of people navigating their own wars and victories. Somewhere in the city, former inmates were trying to rebuild lives. Somewhere corrupt officials were still operating. Somewhere new weapons were being forged from desperate people. But Damian and Seraphina were done fighting those wars. They'd served their time, paid their debts, survived long enough to become something other than what trauma had tried to make them. They drove home, made dinner, sat on their deck watching the sunset over Chicago's skyline. The same city where they'd loved and destroyed and clawed their way back to something resembling peace. You know what I think? Seraphina said. What? I think we won. Not the way we expected, not with clean victory or vindication, but we're still here, still together, still building. She looked at him. That's winning, isn't it? Surviving long enough to define victory on our own terms?
Yeah, Damian said. That's winning. They sat in comfortable silence as night fell over Chicago. Two people who'd been broken by love and violence and their own choices. Two people who'd spent decades learning how to be human again after becoming weapons. Two people who'd finally forgiven themselves and each other enough to just be. The war was over. They'd survived. And in the end, survival looked like an ordinary evening on an ordinary deck in an ordinary house bought with honest work and rebuilt lives. It looked like enough. It was enough. It had to be. Because after everything, after betrayal and prison and death and loss and decades of carrying impossible weight, enough was the greatest victory any of them could have hoped for. The story ended not with explosion or revelation, but with silence. With two people growing old together in a city that had forgotten their names. With the simple extraordinary fact of still being alive when everyone expected them to die. That was the victory. That was the resolution. That was enough.